Okay, I can do it over there. I probably don't need to do it all the time. I wonder if that's good.
Looks like there is somebody here because of all the handouts, but there's not.
Okay.
These beautiful binders. I wonder who did such a great job. It was me. You guys just made that stuff cool, guys. Sorry. Should I not put the right thing? Last time I legally got on this when I got in trouble.
Would you like me to do a site or scanning?
Yeah, there, that's the. Oh.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's my core question.
Yeah, next time we'll take a class.
No, that's not your name.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
And so, it doesn't actually.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was getting rid of it, and obviously, that's my trouble.
I think you recall something to that effect.
Yep. I know you've done it before.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean.
Yeah. Evil.
Right here.
Which one do you guys
So it'll just be on a folder on the desktop here.
Oh, and I can just open it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good then. We don't need to talk. Did I miss one? Okay, okay.
Real quick, we can talk 1 minute out.
So it's just called new folder. It's not anything fancy. It's right there.
Yeah.
You open it up, new folder, and it's just that one right there.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Sorry. I tried to get the water to the brain out of it. But I did try. Yeah, if you just keep going past the elevator, the elevator area, you'll see it if you walk past the elevator. But I put them on.
That's what it's.
It might be a little dry.
Yeah, I know, some people get tired of doing that. Happens. No problem.
Okay. I wasn't sure about the rest of these. No, I didn't bring it.
Recap with that.
It's the one that's not
We know Commissioner Bolton was gonna dial in and
But I actually worked out.
So, well, was there a different one than this NRO
Oh, sorry, I saw it.
Oh, yeah, the other folder's up, but yeah, it's just there on the desktop. So yeah, it's just new folder on the desktop. No, just ours. And PDC's, yeah, it looks like it is.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
I think we'll go ahead and get started. Look, almost all the commissioners here. Ms. Larson, the next matter we have is,
Yes, and I was just waiting to introduce it until Commissioner Wilson joins us.
okay, so he's not there yet.
No, we're just plugging it in there right now. And then I believe Mr. Davenport, if I'm not mistaken, we need to executive.
Correct. We can probably take care of that while we wait.
Okay. We have included executive session and are returning. During executive session, the commission received legal advice on the matters listed in the agenda regarding federal litigation, court, Wildgrass Oil and Gas Community, State of Colorado. It received legal advice on issues raised in docket number 000799. Received legal advice regarding the issues raised in docket number 1903-00337. Received legal advice with regards to the issues raised in the Denver District Court case Wildgrass Oil and Gas Committee et al. COGCC and extraction oil and gas. We did not, the commission did not receive legal advice on the remaining three matters on the agenda having listed concerned citizens, COGCC, Western Range Farms et al. COGCC and Broad Air and Water at COGCC. No decisions were made in executive session and no votes were taken. Mr. Chair, I invite you to encourage a motion to exit executive session.
Someone like to make that motion, please? Thank you, Commissioner Gibb. Made a motion to exit executive session. Is there a second? Second. Second, I think by Commissioner Jolly, and all in favor, say aye. Sign. Now out of executive session. Marty, you'd like to introduce it?
Yes, I would. So before you have, excuse me. You have docket number 1812-00902, Pinnacle Road Operating LLC. The hearing officer on this matter is Mr. Michael Eden. Mr. Eden will be providing you with an overview of the matter and providing you with information with respect to the amount of time that you currently have to present the case. So ask Mr. Eden to please.
Please proceed. Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Commissioners. In this matter, PPC is protesting the overrules application that established in Nelson.
Welcome to Central Encounter.
20-acre joint space and approve up to 32 new horizontal well production of oil and gas and associated hydrocarbon.
Your passcode is confirmed. When you reach home, you will be the first person to join the meeting. The line will be silent until another person joins.
However, PPC does own 100% of the working interest in the southwest quarter of section 4 of the application lands, as well as the majority of the interest throughout the DSU. Also, on February 15, 2019, about 1 week after the initial pre-hearing conference, PPC filed 2 competing spacing applications that overlap with the application plans. This has been a relatively straightforward case, and that the parties filed no dispositive motions. Again, I would like to commend the parties for having efficiently made this case to hearing. The parties included a list of stipulated facts that's included in the final pre-hearing order, and there's also a PDF and portfolio part of the stipulated facts. So we know the parties have stipulated to the expertise of their cases. The final pre-hearing order governs is included in the portfolio. For the final pre-hearing order, each side has 45 minutes to present its case.
Very well, thank you very much. First off, Commissioners, Are there any members of the commission that have a conflict of interest with respect to this matter? None. So then there's a order.
Right here, this is for. Yeah, it goes right here. It goes right there.
Hey, what have you called on that?
My name is John. I swear to church.
My name is Andrew Henning, swear to tell the truth.
My name is Nicola, and I swear to tell the truth.
My name is Kip Titch, I swear to tell the truth.
My name is Jackie May, and I swear to tell the truth.
Very well, very well.
Commissioner, if we may, jointly, we'd like to let you know that we have stipulated to a change in both of our land with Judge Wagner represent the PDC.
And I'm Jackie May, Jackie Road, Lakeside.
Very well, thank you. Record. Next item, so you both know 45 minutes total. We have timekeeper here and opening statement by Nickel Road.
Thank you.
We don't want it on mic.
Commissioners and directors, thank you for your time today. There is one application before you today. And as with similar matters that you have recently heard, your role is to determine if Nickel Road's application complies with the Act. Nickel Road's application, as is shown on the slide before you, seeks to establish an approximate 1120 acre drilling and spacing unit and to authorize up to 32 wells within the unit for the production of the Codell and Niobrara formations. Today, Nickel Road will present substantial evidence that the proposed 1120 acre drilling and spacing unit complies with the technical requirements of the Act. We will introduce land evidence that Nickel Road holds oil and gas mineral and leasehold interests within the application lands, and that since filing the application, Nickel Road is under contract to double its acreage position. We will present evidence that Nickel Road will utilize one surface location for the development of up to 32 wells within the unit pursuant to a signed surface use agreement, and that both the surface owner and mineral owner have submitted a Rule 510 statement in support of Nickel Road's application before you today. We will present evidence that the proposed wells and associated production facility are more than 1,000 feet from any building unit. And finally, that Nickel Road has takeaway capacity and will utilize infrastructure for the production of oil and gas underlying the unit. Next, we will present regulatory evidence that Nickel Road has 30 Form 2 APDs and 1 Form 2A filed and pending with the Commission that accommodates existing production and approved permits and spacing units within and adjacent to the application lands. We will present evidence that Nickel Road intends to file Rule 318A wellbore spacing units to recover the resources within the standard 460-foot setbacks. That Nickel Road has met with PDC multiple times to attempt to resolve PDC's protest, that PDC has filed no competing permits for these lands, and that PDC has filed no valid or quantifiable development plan before you today. We will present geology evidence that the Niobrara and Codell formations are present throughout the spacing unit, that Nickel Road's development plan targets all of the prospective intervals of the geologic formations for the most efficient and economic method of development. And finally, we will present engineering evidence that the 1120 acre unit is not less than the maximum area that can be efficiently and economically drained by the up to 32 wells proposed within the unit. That Nickel Road's data supports the standard 460-foot boundary setbacks and 150-foot interwell setbacks, and that 1 to 2 mile laterals are economic. As you know, the Commission has the authority to establish drilling and spacing units to, number 1, prevent waste, number 2, avoid the drilling of unnecessary wells, and number 3, protect correlative rights. This is known as the three-legged stool. Based on the evidence that we will present to you today, Nickel Road's application satisfies all 3 legs of this three-legged stool. PDC will likely present evidence of its proposed development illustration for the application lands in the form of 2 applications that it filed on February 15th, 2019. This was the date that pre-hearing statements were due in this matter, and it's nearly 5 months after Nickel Road's application was filed. Nickel Road's testimony will show that PDC's reactionary development illustration for the application's lands is not supported by valid surface locations, is not supported by first-in-time permits, and is not supported by commission rules or permitting policies. Nickel Road's development plan, on the other hand, has been carefully tailored to accommodate existing production, approved spacing orders, and approved permits within and adjacent to the application lands, and will ensure that correlative rights are protected and waste is prevented. Nickel Road's plan is executable at the date the spacing order and impending pooling application are approved. The Commission has been very clear about similar matters recently brought before you, and the Commission will approve a drilling and spacing unit that meets the requirements of Section 116 over the protest of another leasehold owner, particularly when the leasehold owner's proposed development plan was not timely presented to the Commission so that it could be fully considered at hearing. After hearing the testimony today, we ask that you approve Nickel Road's spacing application because it complies with the 3 requirements of the Act by number 1, preventing waste, number 2, protecting correlative rights, and number 3, avoiding the drilling of unnecessary wells. PDC's plan, on the other hand, has not been carefully tailored and will in fact harm correlative rights. So thank you all for your time, and we look forward to presenting to you today.
Ms. Wozniacki.
Good afternoon, commissioners. I had a moment with my son where I had an item I'd like to bring with me. It was a missing piece of a jigsaw puzzle, the maroon bells. And of course, it's right there in the middle of the second bell, so you could tell that something is missing. Yes, sir.
May we have your name, please, sir?
My apologies. Michael Jewell, RC Goodwill, on behalf of PDC Energy Inc. You're in the zone. To see that missing piece, it ruins not only the entire scene, but the effort as well. More on that later. PDC presents its side of this matter to test the critical fact. I'll stipulate with counsel. Yes, we know from previous hearings that there's no minimum standard for percentage of working interest to have a drilling and spacing unit. However, we have not yet tested what a true development plan competition looks like. So all of our exhibits have been whittled down to, yes, indeed, just 5, so we can maximize your time here to focus on that all-important issue. And I do want to thank Mr. Eden for a very thorough recommendation, but I do want to point out on page 2 how he raises this issue. We want to say not only is it a development plan covering 2,560 acres, but as I will get to later, even broader than that. But before going further, I do want to establish a few foundation critical facts. According to PDC's title, Nickel Road does only have a 1.6% leasehold here in this unit as presented to you. As I said before, we acknowledge the precedent on this matter, but we believe it's worth saying PDC is the majority owner right now. PDC believes that the fact of some uncertainties to title indicate a lack of readiness. And in a way, calling PDC's ideas reactionary, we wonder about preparedness and prudent operatorship, if you will, in filing this. And not to speculate too far, but we know about legislative ideas that are occurring and whether or not, as opposed to even January, the idea of pooling a majority interest owner may not be available any longer. So did you approve something that can fully be consummated is really a good question now. Nickel Road's application implies what we believe is an odd and inefficient mix of lateral lengths, mixing 1, 1.5, and 2 mile laterals. We'll speak to the engineering issues there. The standard, as you've said many, many times in these hearings, is the 2-miler, where that could be appropriately done. The configuration is disjointed. That configuration leads to a domino effect that's going to make this whole area have to be rearranged, probably leading to more surface disturbance and to different lateral mixes that are not as efficient as just clear 2-mile laterals. We'll discuss about the 460 versus 150 foot gap and how we believe that's going to strand resource, at least as postured today. PDC does have also existing contracts and takeoff capacity with midstream companies that are ready to go on these lands. But back to that point again, though, that puzzle piece, this development plan that we think is all important for you to focus your energies on. PDC did submit 1906, 00338, and 339, a stand-up and a lay-down sharing Section 5 that are part of this application lands. As our exhibits will show, this will drain with efficient 2-mile laterals, 2,560 acres. You'll also see that we have demonstrated excellent discipline and patience in executing a broader plan. You can take administrative notice of the 20 or so DSUs we have filed in this area, part of the larger idea that PDC is looking to deploy. And that next logical move, pursuant to maybe a management approval of PDC, will be a Rule 216 CDP. With respect to your time, it takes a lot of energy, effort when we have an operator who wants to do it right and not have to waste the time of the commission staff or come before you several times to get a CDP approved. Our testimony today will show that timeline, how things have developed along those lines. PDC is also looking into monitoring and evaluation of public health of the CDP and how there's a net plus when you use a CDP, when you minimize impacts, when you have a plan in place where your staff has been trained on the etiology of disease in the area and the epidemiology of tracking that data. That's the kind of thing PDC wants to do in their development plan. This is not something we just threw together. Indeed, we withheld these 2 DSUs hoping a deal would be stricken. We would not have to be before you today. Frankly, that's why those 2 applications were late. So we believe PDC, well, we want you to take a hard look at these careful development plans. We fear that a non-operator approved DSU like this would hinder this vision for the application lands in the surrounding area. That's the missing piece. That piece can make this plan work or have to be redesigned. So let's not leave a gaping hole in that puzzle. Thank you for your time.
I'd like to introduce our first land witness. That's okay. Thank you. Ms. Haney, we've already stipulated to expertise of witnesses, but for purposes of the record, can you just please give me your name, a brief summary of your background, your position with Nickel Road, and your familiarity with the land exhibit?
Hi, my name is Jackie Haney. I'm a principal of Nickel Road. I'm familiar with Nickel Road's spacing application before you today, PDC's protest. I'm also familiar with this exhibit 1 up here and help prepare these land exhibits today.
Thank you, Ms. Haney. Could you please describe Exhibit 1 and specifically Nickel Road and PDC's mineral ownership and leasehold ownership within the application lands?
Yes, Nickel Road filed our spacing application on September 20th, 2018 to establish an approximate 1,120 acre DSU on incorporating the lands in Section 5 and lands in the west half of Section 4 in the southeast quarter, west half of Section 4 in the southeast quarter of Section 4 as well. In 6 North, 65 West to approve up to 32 horizontal locations with 460-foot setbacks and 150-foot inner well setbacks, utilizing 1 well pad to develop this unit.
I think I jumped ahead of myself in my questions. Do you mind describing, after you've described the application, the mineral and leasehold interests of Nickel Road and PDC within the application lands?
Yeah, Nickel Road owns both minerals and leasehold interests within this unit. The minerals are owned in fee, and these are across both Section 4 and 5. As you can see on Exhibit 1, our mineral ownership is in the north half of Section 4, and our leasehold and your ownership is in the south half of Section 5. This leasehold currently, as discussed, is just under 2% working interest. We have acquisitions agreed upon that will take us over to a 10% working interest. This leasehold strategy has actually mirrored some of our other applications in the past, in which we plan to grow our working interest prior to development into a 30 to 50% working interest, as we've done on our Noble and Drake spacing units.
And are you aware of PDC's ownership within these lands?
Yes, according to our records, PDC's working interest ownership is just under 50%.
Thank you. Could you please describe the surface ownership and whether Nickel Road has a surface use agreement for its proposed development?
The surface in these sections is owned in fee, and Nickel Road executed an SUA with the Riemann family on September 14th, 2018. Their lands are located in the northwest quarter of Section 5. Mr. Riemann has submitted a 510 statement in support of NRO's application as a surface and mineral owner.
Thank you. And can you please address the midstream or infrastructure plans that Nickel Road has to develop this proposed unit?
Yes, Nickel Road's going to utilize existing midstream infrastructure. There's existing midstream infrastructure just a couple hundred feet away from our current well pad in which we have an SUA. Some of the acreage within this unit is dedicated. Our acreage is not dedicated at the moment, so we are exploring options that should be ready in time for our development plans, which our goal is to commence operations by the end of this year.
Thank you. And has Nickel Road filed any Forms 2 or 2A for development of these lands?
Yes, Nickel Road filed 30 Form 2 APDs and a Form 2A to drill the Reman wells on September 17th, 2018, pursuant to our signed SUA with Mr. Reman, and these are in the process with the COGCC.
Thank you. That concludes our land testimony.
Very well. Commissioners, any questions? Oh, sorry.
I'll just wait for us.
Sorry.
Ms. Haney, just one question. Can you tell me what your percentage ownership is in the northwest of 4?
At this time, Nickel Road has a 0% working interest in the northwest of 4. We have approximately a 2% royalty interest in that northwest quarter.
Thank you. No further questions.
I won't forget to rebut that.
I also will mention that our current leasehold on those minerals does expire in March of 2020.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
All right, commissioners. Mr. Boyan.
Let's follow up on that. So you own those minerals in the 100% of the northwest corner?
Not 100%. We own a portion of the lands, the mineral interest in the northwest quarter of 4.
And it's leased to somebody else?
Correct.
That lease, those leases expire
In March of 2020.
Okay. So you would potentially pull them in into some kind of an arrangement.
That's correct.
Their lease hasn't expired by the time you get ready to go.
That's correct.
And okay. So when you calculate your leasehold ownership in the unit, it's not including the mineral.
Not at this time.
Basically, you're a mineral owner, like
Yeah.
all the other mineral owners in that unit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner Dodd.
What would happen to your plan if it didn't get spread in time and the lease did expire in the first quarter of section 4?
It would be our intention to lease to ourselves and have that leasehold ownership to add to our working interest.
Very well. Anything else? All right.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce our next witness, our regulatory witness, Ms. Jennifer Lynn. Ms. Lynn, could you just please provide your name, a brief summary of your background and your position with Nickel Road?
Yes. Commissioners and staff, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
My
My
name
name
is
is Jennifer Lynn.
I'm the
I'm the
regulatory and environmental manager for Nickel Road
Operating.
I did personally prepare and file Form 2A and 30 associated Form 2s for the proposed Reman pad and prepare the regulatory exhibits we will be discussing today.
Thank you, Ms. Lynn. Let's start with exhibit number 20, which is a timeline. Can you please briefly describe this exhibit and why it's important for the commission to understand?
Yes, so this timeline is a comprehensive overview of the actions taken by both Nickel Road and PDC to date. Nickel Road's actions are denoted on this timeline in green with PDC in blue. The field survey for our proposed Reman pad was conducted in mid-August of 2018, directly followed by the execution of a surface use agreement and submittal of the Form 2A and 30 associated Form 2s for the proposed Reman pad.
Please note that no objections or comments were received during the two into a 30-day comment period.
Nickel Road solution application for the unit was then submitted on September 20th, originally
December 2018 hearing docket. PDC's protest to Nickel Road's unit was filed on December 3rd, followed immediately by an active protest resolution discussion between Nickel Road and PDC in mid-December. Following this initial discussion, this docket was voluntarily continued from the from the January to the March hearing cycle to allow for ongoing resolution discussions. PDC's spacing applications for the area surrounding the application lands were submitted between mid-January and early February of 2019. Overlapping applications to Nickel Road's Reman unit were not filed until February 15th, which of note was the exhibit deadline for this docket here before you today, and 5 months after Nickel Road's initial submittals. The key takeaway here is that PDC's submittals have been fully reactionary to Nickel Road proposing an executable plan in this area.
Thank you. I'd like to turn next to exhibit number 18. Can you please describe this exhibit and why it's important for the commission to understand?
Yes, I'd be happy to. This map depicts the current status of the application and surrounding lands as they are currently approved through the COGCC. As you can see, this information was used as the basis for Nickel Road's DSU configuration. PDC's approved permits are highlighted on this map in the orange boxes. Please note that there are Form 2 refiles in process with the permitting staff on the east-west oriented wallboards near the bottom of the map. Also noted on this map in the blue outline is a recently approved spacing unit, approved in 2017. Nickel Road spacing unit was planned to maximize lateral lengths, giving consideration to existing production, approved permits, and approved spacing units adjacent to the application lands. At the time of our submittal, no additional information regarding PDC's plans for this area were in process with the COGCC, nor otherwise available for consideration during our planning of our DSU.
Thank you, Ms. Lind. Turning now to Nickel Road's exhibit number 3. Can you please describe this exhibit?
Yes, this slide shows Nickel Road's proposed surface location within the application lands. Prior to obtaining a surface use agreement for this location, Nickel Road spent months of time vetting the area to determine the right location, greater than 1,000 feet from building units, and to obtain surface owner consent for the proposed development plan. Nickel Road analyzed numerous surface conditions through our planning process, including topography, floodplains, proximity to residences, and surrounding land uses. Nickel Road has given special consideration to noise, light, dust, and other nuisance conditions. The Reman family, the owner of our pad, did submit a Rule 510 statement in support of Nickel Road's plan. We also have engaged in initial discussions with the town of Eaton, who are proximate to this pad location, have discussed the RBMPs with them, and we have been met with support.
Thank you. Let's turn next to Nickel Road's exhibit number 15. Can you please describe this exhibit?
Yes, the map on the right-hand side of this slide depicts PDC's overlapping development illustration that was provided on February 15th. The map on the left is a detailed aerial of PDC's proposed surface use area. I would like to draw your attention specifically to PDC's proposed surface location depicted in blue on both maps. Building units are depicted on the map on the left as green dots with 500 and 1,000 foot building unit setbacks depicted in red and yellow outlines respectively. The proposed location falls well within 500 feet of existing building units and would likely meet the criteria for a large oil and gas facility in an urban mitigation area, also known as a LUMA, which does meet the criteria for immediate flagging and director review under the recently released director mandate. Additionally, this plan does not comply with COGCC regulations as it does not fall within an established 318A GWA drilling window as is required for this area, and it straddles multiple surface parcel boundaries. Without waivers in place from affected surface owners, this location is non-compliant. It is Nickel Road's understanding that PDC does not have an executed surface use agreement nor waivers at this time.
Thank you. And similar to the prior exhibit, could you please turn to Nickel Road exhibit number 16 and describe this exhibit?
Yes, again here, the map on the right-hand side of the slide is depicts PDC's overlapping development illustration, while the map on the left-hand side is a detailed aerial of PDC's proposed surface use area. PDC's proposed surface location is depicted in green on both of these maps. Again, building units are depicted as green dots, with 500 and 1,000-foot building unit setbacks in red and yellow. This proposed location actually falls within the 200-foot statewide safety setback from buildings and building units. In fact, as you can see, this pad is proposed directly on top of an existing building unit. This location would also likely meet the criteria for a LUMA location and immediate director review. As proposed, again, this plan does not comply with COGCC regulation, as it does not fall within a drilling window and also straddles multiple surface boundaries. And again, here it is Nickel Road's understanding that PDC does not have an executed agreement or waivers at this time.
Thank you. Let's turn next to Nickel Road's exhibit number 2. Can you please describe the status of existing wells within the proposed unit?
Yes, so this map does illustrate the status of existing wells within the application lands in relation to Nickel Road's submitted APDs. As you can see, there are several existing vertical wells within the application lands, which presents a unique subsurface challenge in this area.
Thank you. And turning next to Nickel Road's exhibit number 17. Can you please describe this exhibit?
Yes, so building upon our previous slide, Nickel Road has carefully planned our proposed wellbore trajectories to be in compliance with the rules, to maximize recoveries, and to protect relative rights for all existing producers. Nickel Road's intent would be to extend our laterals to maximize recoveries should existing wells in this unit be plugged appropriately prior to the commencement of operations. Subsurface considerations will be discussed in additional detail during our preceding engineering testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Linden. And finally, I'd like to turn back to this timeline. Can you just give a summary of your testimony today in this timeline?
I'd be happy to. It is important to understand that Nickel Road has moved efficiently through our planning and permitting processes, including the execution of a surface use agreement. Only after Nickel Road took action in the area did PDC propose their reactionary non-compliant plan 5 months later.
Thank you. This concludes our regulatory testimony.
Very well, Mr. Jewell.
Thank you. Ms. Lynn, did you perhaps get the information about, as you styled it, a proposed surface location of PDC from a filed Form 2A?
No, the only plan that we were provided was the development illustrations.
Correct, that we provided.
Correct.
And would it be fair to say that that diagram that we provided is merely for illustration purposes, does not indicate a precise surface location?
I could not speak to that fact.
So do you have any actual knowledge of an actual proposed location by PDC in these 2 spacing units?
Just the location that was provided for on these exhibits.
And are you personally aware of any of PDC's surface negotiations?
No.
No further questions. Thank you.
Any rebuttal?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
Thank you. I'd like to introduce our geology witness, Mr. Kit Tincher. Mr. Tincher, do you mind just briefly stating your name, a brief summary of your background, and your familiarity with the geology exhibit?
Yeah, my name is Kit Tincher. I'm currently the Vice President of Development and Geology for Nickel Road Operating. I have about 14 years of experience in oil and gas, mostly in Colorado.
Thank you. And did you prepare the geology exhibits today?
I did. I have personally prepared everything in terms of the exhibits and the testimony.
Thank you. Kit, I'd like you to walk through each of your 5 geology exhibits, starting with exhibit number 4 and then the remaining 4 geology exhibits.
Sure. Exhibit 4 is a structure map on top of the Niobrara Formation, the top of Niobrara A chalk. It's showing 25-foot interval, contour intervals, showing a northwest to west dipping formation. You can see the blue dots represent the digital logs for control of the structure maps, not only for this map as well as moving forward. The last thing I'd like to point out is the dark blue line connecting some of those blue dots represents a cross section that I will show in in further slides here. Exhibit 5 is showing an isopac map on the Codell Formation. As you can see, it ranges from about 19 to 22 feet in this area. Contour interval is 1 foot on this, and we approximate the entire application lands to range within 19 to 22 feet. Exhibit 6 is a isopac map, this time on the Niobrara Formation. Contour interval on this map is 5 feet, again showing all of the structural control that we have in light blue dots in the cross section I'll show you on the next slide. Niobrara in this area ranges from approximately 260 to 280 feet of gross thickness. Moving forward to Exhibit 7. Exhibit 7 is the stratigraphic cross section. This is flattened on top of the Codell sandstone. This is showing that all the stratigraphic intervals are present within the Niobrara and Codell formations. You'll notice there's 3 light blue shadings. Those are the 3 productive intervals of the Niobrara A chalk, the B chalk, the C chalk, as well as the Codell sandstone down in the green color. And finally, Exhibit 8 is a pipe log. This shows the entire section from top of the Niobrara down to the base of the Codell. Log characteristics indicate hydrocarbon charge saturation within all 4 intervals, the Niobrara A, B, C, and the Codell sandstone.
Thank you, Kit. That concludes our geology testimony.
Mr. Joel?
No further questions. We stipulate the presence of the Codell and Niobrara. Thank you.
Obviously, no rebuttal this time, commissioners. I have a brief, quick question. Exhibit 5. What are the, because I can't tell for color in the northwest of 4, those existing wells or proposed wells?
The northwest of 4, the laterals going from south to north, those are locations, and you can go back to that, but those are not existing wells.
Yeah, locations only. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce our final witness, Mr. Andrew Haney. Mr. Haney, could you please provide your name, your title, a brief summary of your background, and your familiarity with the engineering exhibits prepared in support of the application?
Yes, my name is Andrew Haney, managing partner of Nickel Road. I've been working in Colorado for the last 10 years, specifically the Niobrara and Codell formations, and have prepared these engineering exhibits here today.
Thank you. Let's start with exhibit number 21, which is a summary of Nickel Road's development plan. Can you please briefly describe this exhibit?
Yes, I can. And just to the last question, Mr. Benton, the wells you saw there were actually expired permits that were originally filed, so they're no longer in the system.
Thank you.
What we did here was, I want to talk about 3 important aspects of what we look for in a good development plan: preventing waste, avoiding the drilling of unnecessary wells, and protecting correlative rights. I also want to talk a little bit about this plan specifically because it is very detailed, it's very specific, and it's very executable. Specifically, when we looked at this area, we did take great care to tailor the development to the lay of the land. So where you have approved permits by the commission, where you have approved units by the commission, where you have existing vertical producers, we went out of our way to try and accommodate the development that could maximize recovery, minimize waste with those facts on the ground. I think when we talk about correlative rights, I think we have to be very mindful of the fact that we want to talk about protecting all of the correlative rights, including those people that have interest in those producing vertical wells. So we could have very easily job sticks on the map and laid over perfect lateral lengths over all these wells that are producing, but that's not how that's going to happen on the ground. So when we talk about variable lateral lengths, we did that on purpose because we felt it would not be prudent to permit a well over the top of existing producers. Now, some of these wells are newer, some are older. If the ones that are older work with those operators, the SRCs, the Nobles, the Bazewaters, we'll work with them to make sure that they can be properly plugged and abandoned at the right point in time. And if our first occupation of the pad does not develop those locations, which would likely not, we can come back at that point and extend those laterals to make sure there aren't stranded resources. That was the thought process in what we did, rather than just permitting right over the cross of everything and then saying it's going to be very efficient. So we will work with those operators to make sure that those things get dealt with. Now, in terms of the 460 setbacks, we talk about waste in that regard. It's very commonplace, as I'm sure all producers are aware, to come back when these DSUs get put in place and to propose more spacing units to try and make sure that we capture the recovery within those border areas. And that is definitely Nickel Road's intention here. So what you have before you is merely the DSU, not the entire WSUs that will come with it very shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Haney. Let's turn next to exhibit number 22. Can you please describe your engineering analysis for the application lands?
Absolutely. What we try to do here is we try to get a sense of the recovery of the resource. So we always go into each of these areas and we try to find the most recent, most proximal completions and well results to try and hang our hat on what type of expected ultimate recovery from these wells of different lateral lengths, and then also what that means in terms of recovery factor from the resource. So what we've done here, we've tried to summarize based on the formation, the Niobrara and the Codell, the petrophysics, which are very well accepted, and I would say looking at the bulk of the other 511 testimonies that have been provided in this area, I don't think there's much deviation in these parameters. It's pretty well understood formations. But you can see that this lends us to an in-place volume calculation on the order of about 56 million barrels of oil. What we're showing here is each of those lateral lengths, each of those type wells that accommodate the existing vertical producers. It's a combination of 1.5, and 2 milers. Obviously, we have mostly 1.5 milers given the orientation of the permits that are in place, the approved units that are in place. But what we're able to achieve based on offset performance with these up to 32 wells is an additional 7.6 million barrels of oil recovery. That yields a recovery factor when put in combination with the vertical producers and what they're expected to continue to recover of about 14%, which is very reasonable in this type of system. And in fact, I would argue this is a volatile oil. Typically, recovery factors are elevated. Most of the testimonies that are shown to you are for black oils. Specifically where we are here in this part of the play, 14% is quite reasonable given this type of system.
Thank you, Mr. Haney. Let's turn to exhibit number 23. Can you please describe this exhibit?
Yeah, so this basically goes through each of those types of wells that we present in our development plan for each of the lateral lengths and for each of the formations. And it shows you what we are expecting in terms of performance for each of those locations. You can see that ranges from 150 to 340,000 barrels of oil in the Niobrara and the Codell, and 210 to 290,000 barrels of oil. Again, these were based on what we call key analog wells, which we'll look at here in just a moment, but these are wells that are proximal and wells that are recent.
Great. I'm going to jump to exhibit number 10 with respect to analog wells. Can you please describe this exhibit?
Yes, so these are those proximal recent wells, and this covers the 6 North, 65 West Township, which is where we are with this proposed unit. It also looks at the adjacent townships, 7 North 65, 666, 664. And what we've done is grab a really good kind of distribution of well results recently. We have quite a range of completions that have been tried in this area. And I understand that perhaps some operators want to focus on pumping extremely big completions and try to maximize individual well economics. That's not really the plan we put before you. The plan we put before you was really meant to maximize the value and the recovery of this area. It's always a balance between the right amount of wells and the right size completion. We think we've struck that balance with this, but these wells were used as the basis for that spacing pattern. And so when you look at the drainage radius for the Niobrara of about close to 300, 400 feet, when you look at the Codell, 100 to 200 feet, what we've proposed to you is up to 30, 32 wells is appropriate and is well positioned within those results and what we've observed from these wells.
Thank you. I'll jump back to Nickel Road's exhibit number 9. Can you please describe this in your drainage analysis for these lands?
Again, what you saw on that table previously, those drainage area calculations, those drainage radius calculations, this is just the math that goes behind it, once again, supporting how we get from those in-place volume estimations from what we see on well logs to what we expect in terms of recovery factor and eventual drainage. So I won't belabor this one too much.
Great. And finally, could you please summarize, exhibit number 24, which is your economic analysis?
Yeah, so I think it's always important to show what our expectations are. And so what we provided here as part of the exhibits was to try and show what we expect to recover in terms of volume, and also what we expect to be able to deliver, not only in terms of return, but in terms of tax streams, which are we have to be mindful of as well. And so what we've done here is we basically showed each of those type wells of variable length by formation to show that there are robust economics to be supported by these wells. Frankly, this is an area of the field that's been very well developed, and this is just really an idle area. And so Nickel Road felt that was a great opportunity here to come in and properly develop this area and try to maximize those returns. I'd also note that when we look at these economics and you look at the recoveries that we're showing, we always use an economic criteria to cut these things off. We never let them go greater than 30 years. And the numbers that you see on this exhibit were generated with February 18th strip pricing. So something that's very recent and representative.
Thank you. This concludes our case in chief testimony. Ms. Larson, do you mind if I have a quick time check?
Of course, 15 minutes and 55.
Thank you.
Mr. Joel.
Hey, Commissioner Benson. Good afternoon, Mr. Haney. A few quick questions. Can you tell me how many horizontal wells Nickel Road has drilled in the Watsonburg so far?
Our team, in its experience in the DJ Basin, has drilled well in excess of 100 horizontal wells and completed 100 horizontal wells. We, under the flag of Nickel Road, have done 3. And we brought those 3 wells online actually since the last time we've been in front of the commission.
Thank you. And those 3 wells, were they drilled off the same pad?
They were.
Can you tell me how long between receiving those 3 permits was it before they were drilled?
Those permits were approved at the very beginning of 2018, and those wells commenced drilling in July of 2018.
Thank you. Now, did you use the basis of these 3 wells, your experience with the economics with these 3 wells, to base the economic figures off of the presentation today?
In fact, beyond the experience of the team on the wells that's been a part of the basin, first thing we did was look at all the output and completions and well data. We've evaluated 1,000 and often 5 or 6 townships. But yes, we use those as the basis for our projections.
And I noticed in your slide here about well economics, I'm concerned about particularly the 1-milers. Is there a price point that you're basing profitability off the 1-milers?
I think it all comes down to completion. Again, we can put together a illustration of 2-mile laterals without considering producing wells that are underground, but I don't think that by completing and within 150 feet, which is not allowed in statute, completing 150 feet of those producing wells, that is a better outcome.
Did you take into account this, what you're proposing, I would consider a tighter spacing than anything you drilled before? Did you take in that to account for your type curve analysis?
Tighter. We actually the projected URs from these offset wells to lead us to what their drainage radius was, and then we used that as the spacing pattern. So it was absolutely derived off of offset performance.
And are those 3 drilled wells enough to give you a good understanding of your parent-child degradation here?
The 3 wells you're referring to, I think, in your question, are in a different part of the basin. They're in the western part of the basin. The wells that we have brought to the commission that we're actually getting ready to execute on are just to the north of this. There's a spacing unit that was recently approved just to the north of this that has 32 wells, very similarly distributed the way that this has been proposed.
Thank you. No further questions.
As well, Leslie.
No rebuttal at this time.
Commissioners, any questions? Very well. Thank you very much.
Hey, Commissioner Benson. PDC's first witness, I'd like to introduce Josh Wagner, Land Supervisor for the Wattenberg Team PDC. Mr. Wagner, could you briefly describe your education?
Again, my name is Josh Wagner, Land Supervisor at PDC, supervise the landmen and the surface land team. I've had over 10 years of land experience, 7 of that being in the DJ Basin.
Mr. Wagner, are you familiar with the lands under consideration today? I am. And did you have a hand in creating these exhibits?
Yes, I was under the knowledge and direction of creation of these exhibits.
Technical difficulty, sorry. Also, you know, oh yeah, this one. Thank you. Yeah. Button. So Wagner, could you please identify this exhibit?
Absolutely. So, Commissioners, you're looking at 2 proposed DSUs. The one on the left here consists of section 5 and 32. 16 wells going from south to north, combining Nio and Codell horizontals from one pad. PDC's acreage is in yellow. And on the right, sections 4 and 3, similarly 16 wells going from west to east, combination of Nio and Codell wells, again, planned from one pad.
Mr. Wagner, can you identify the yellow portions in this exhibit?
Sure. PDC's acreage is listed in yellow here, depicted in yellow. We got into this area through 2 different transactions with Bayswater and Noble in 2017 and 2018. Really, it's that time when we started planning wells, the engineering and the land behind what you're seeing today. Currently, I think in this particular area, we've got approximately 12 DSUs planned.
Moving on to Exhibit B, can you identify this exhibit, please?
Sure. This exhibit is Nickel Road's planned DSU, as we just heard in their testimony. PDC's acreage is in yellow. And they have, again, a combination of 1 mile, 1.5, and 2 mile intervals.
What percentage of the working interest is PDC on this proposed unit?
So we're waiting on updated title, but currently in Nickel Road DSU, we're approximately at 56% working interest.
And are you aware, or does PDC have title, gives you an idea of what percentage they own in their proposed DSU?
We are waiting on updated title, but from the information we have, we've only found that they own 8.6% working interest.
Mr. Wagner, can you please identify and describe this Exhibit C?
Exhibit C is the alternative if the Nickel Road DSU prevails. Again, PDC's acreage is in yellow on this exhibit. And our preferred planned DSU consists of more than 2 pads, 3 here, with shorter laterals, 1 mile and 1.5.
What problem structurally does PDC see with this proposed idea? In terms of well pads or?
Certainly. So in order to develop our acreage, we're going to be having greater surface impact. There's engineering components behind this, which you'll hear later. But basically, it's going to be a lot more activity than what our plan would propose.
And I'm looking at section 32 there. If this DSU were to be approved in this application, then is that essentially, or what does that do to 32?
Essentially, we have 1 mile laterals planned, but we're really at the midst of stranding acreage with this proposal here.
Go back and looking at Exhibit D. Please identify and briefly describe.
Sure. So this exhibit, similar to Exhibit C, just describes basically what we think, PDC thinks is going to be stranded acreage, and that's identified in the hashed markers on the exhibit.
And speaking of stranded acreage, is PDC then proposed any wellbore spacing units that would address that?
The only unit, or the only wells that PDC is aware of is what's planned, but we have not been proposed.
Mr. Wagner, were you ever approached by Nickel Road about this proposed spacing unit?
We were informed by formal notice of the DSU. We actually have been in discussions with Nickel Road on another matter just north of this area, and kind of initiated discussions or matters regarding Nickel Road's DSU in front of you around the same time as the other matter that was being discussed.
We had mentioned that PDC filed some 20 or so DSUs. Was Nickel Road aware of 338 and 339, and under what circumstances?
So when we met with Nickel Road, we had again discussed another matter, which is a DSU just north of this area. However, we brought information to the table that we were going to be developing this area on a larger plan, and basically discussed that we would hold off on filing any competing DSUs because we had good understanding. We thought we could work the deal out and not have to be here today.
Mr. Wagner, have you ever struck a deal with Nickel Road?
So we were able to negotiate a letter to them on the matter to the north, but we have not finalized any transactions with yet.
Mr. Wagner, turning our attention to Exhibit E, can you please identify and describe?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, these are the 12 DSUs that really were created by the transactions that we did in 2017, 2018. We're looking at this area, and Michael mentioned this too earlier, is more or less the overall plan. Been considering a CPP for this area because it's such a large and consolidated area. So basically what you're looking at is 12 different DSUs that PDC has since submitted in subsequent hearings. So.
To get to this point where you have 12 DSUs and 20 more globally than even this exhibit shows, how long did your planning start and what were all the details involved?
So part of our transactions in 2017 and 2018, part of the evaluation is us putting more or less sticks on the map and starting the evaluation at that time, just due to the transaction itself. Around mid-2018 is when we started really making strides in planning development in this particular area. And again, as you saw in the time frame of Nickel Road's proposal, it was around November-ish that we started to talk to Nickel Road about these particular DSUs and try to come to an understanding. But it took a very long time to get plans in place for this larger area.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Has PDC filed for any APDs in this application yet?
We have not filed for any APDs, only the spacing units referenced.
What reasons for that?
Mainly it takes a long time. Again, part of those transactions, we just had sticks on a map, and we really wanted to understand the area and gain more working interest and really look at this area on a larger development. We know the trend is going towards CDPs and trying to maximize the reservoir contact while minimizing the surface impact. So basically, we were looking at it from that perspective and really looking at the land and engineering piece and being as prudent as we can instead of rushing piles permits that are dubious.
So that being said, with all these DSUs and a CDP coming down, what is PDC's thought about this person time idea?
We're really focused on correlative rights, preventing waste, looking at engineering, health and safety, really the overall impact of our development. My personal opinion, you see in Wyoming a similar matter where it's turned into a permitting war, and it's really, it gives no incentive for operators to work together. It's just who can file the fastest, and really doesn't account for moderation between operators.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. In your opinion, does Nickel Road's plan as presented in this application protect correlative rights and prevent waste?
In my opinion, it does not.
In your opinion, does PDC's plan in 338, 339, and the larger unit, as in Exhibit E, protect correlative rights and prevent waste?
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Further questions?
Ms. Wozniacki.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. I just have a few follow-up questions for you. Does PDC have a surface use agreement for its proposed development for the two 1280-acre units that we've been discussing today?
We do not have a surface use agreement. We're negotiating that side of both those DCs.
So PDC has engaged with the surface owners for those two locations?
We've engaged multiple surface owners in the area. What you saw on the exhibit is our preferred development. That does not mean that we've solidified plans.
Thank you. And you said that really since mid-2018, you've been solidifying your development plans for this area. Is that correct?
More or less, yes.
Okay. So I guess I question why you aren't able to pinpoint your surface locations for these two units at this time.
We're looking at overall plan, meaning that we really want to understand from a big picture where we're negotiating certain agreements, what it's going to look like for us. Really in regards to timing, how many wells we're going to put in each section. So it took us that long to figure out plans and really get going. We started negotiating on service. So.
Thank you. And what is the timing of PDC's development, specifically for the two units that we're discussing today?
Currently, we have these on the development plan in approximately 2 years, but that again is subject to change. But that would be right now what we're slated.
Thank you. And do you agree that PDC has established a drilling and spacing unit for sections 29 and 32, adjacent to Nickel Road's proposed unit?
So those units, those permits came over from our Bayswater transaction, and we don't have any plans to use those existing permits.
So what is your intention for that existing drilling and spacing unit and approved permits?
Well, our plan was to vacate that existing and plan a 2-mile spacing as you saw in the exhibit.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Commissioner Ager.
I just had a quick question because I hear you talking about development plan, but you don't have a formal. You're not. Is PDC? Where are they looking at pursuing a formal CDP?
We've engaged outside counsel and talked internally about the CDP. We filed the issues. We've got our engineering plans pretty much done for the area. So that is our next step. So that's what I was trying to describe today. Is it took us a long time to get there. As you can see, it covers over 10,000 acres, 12 different DSUs. So it is subject to final management approval, but we're heading in that direction. And our next steps is really to meet with the COGCC to start those discussions.
Until now, you haven't. And when you talk about development plan, it's internal, kind of an internal term of what you're going to do with that area.
Correct. Other than the DSUs that we've submitted for this next hearing, We haven't submitted any APDs or engaged the COGCC about formal plans yet. It's only been internal.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Eger, can I add a quick comment to that? EDC has authorized, and we had 2 initial conversations with Ms. Stancic about filing CDPs. Like Mr. Wagner said, we haven't hashed out the precise details, but that's kind of the point. So we want to make sure we understand how to streamline and make it as painless as possible.
Mr. Jolly?
Thanks. Commissioner Eger just asked one question.
May I redirect?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Wagner, speaking of SUA procurement, does it stand to reason that if you look at this whole area in Exhibit E as a CDP, your SUA needs change and frankly probably get minimized?
Absolutely, and you know that's a part of the CDP process is really looking at the surface impact. And so with this consolidation, we really feel like we're going to be able to get as less SUAs as possible and maximize development.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. No further questions.
Commissioner Eger?
Just one more question. If Nickel Creek Road's application is approved, does it prevent you from applying for CDP for the rest of the land?
It doesn't prevent us, but it does play an important part. As more DSU, non-included DSUs are submitted in these areas of plan CDP, it will change the layout and potentially change the reason to go actually pursue CDP. So can't more answer that question, but I will say that it has an impact.
Sure, thanks.
A couple of questions, unless any other commissioners have questions. All right, thank you. Did I understand correctly that you inherited essentially a 2-mile DSU in 29 and 32 from Bayswater?
Both Bayswater and Noble. So 2 transactions really consisting of 7,000 acres and 10,000 acres, which is not depicted on this exhibit, but it's in this general area. So of those 2 transactions, we gained the leasehold that you're seeing in the exhibit.
Maybe I need to make myself a little more clear. Was there an approved drilling and spacing unit in sections 29 and 32?
So Bayswater had an approved unit that we acquired.
So that would be a 2-mile unit in 29 and 32.
Right.
So I guess I was curious about in your let's see. Well, let's go back to Exhibit C. If you have an approved DSU in 29 and 32, why would you only show 1-mile laterals in 32? When you already have an approved DSU for 2-mile laterals there.
So section 29, it's hard to express in this exhibit because we have their acreage that's in section 28 and 27. So we have plans to develop section 29 that you cannot see on this exhibit. It's a part of the larger DSU plan on Exhibit E. So it doesn't align the current 29 and 32 spacing unit you're referring to. It doesn't really align with our plans, development plans, because of our leasehold layout.
Yet it would still be possible to do 2-mile laterals there.
It would still be possible, but we feel like it would be, it would again cause waste and not be really the best practice to do in our opinion.
And again, you have also, it looks like you have 28 and 27 tied up, so potentially you could do 2-mile horizontal laterals there. This is again based on Exhibit E.
Correct. It's possible, but it's again a part of a larger plan that we believe would cause waste.
All right. Have you had any discussions with the surface owner, Mr. Riemann, I believe his name is, about surface use agreements?
I don't know the specifics of our surface landman's negotiations with Mr. Riemann, but I know that we've engaged him. Again, when we inherited the existing permits from Bayswater, they were not up to our best management practice as far as what we like to drill from and how we lay out our pad location. So again, a part of this larger plan, and given the fact that we wouldn't have used the service layout of Bay's waters, we started negotiations with Freeman and several surrounding owners.
Have you had a chance to read his 510 statement?
I've seen through it, yes.
Okay. So would you care to comment on what he said with respect to follow-up conversations with PDC? Basically, it says, when he declined, I was told, this is his statement, I was told that they would place a pad across the street from my front door if I was not willing to accommodate their need for additional space on my property. It goes on to say, prefer not to do business with PDC unless they are willing to be reasonable and respect my rights as a surface owner.
So I can't comment on the remarks made by Mr. Riemann because I was not at that negotiation. All I can say is, in my experience with PDC, we don't negotiate in a hostile manner. So I'm not sure what else to say, except that I can't really comment because I wasn't.
Understand.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Boygan?
Sure. Thanks. If I could follow up, I'm a little confused. If we could put Nickel Road's Exhibit 18 up, I don't know if Ms. Wesselanky can do that. It's the one that shows planned wells in the area. And I thought what it was showing, it says, it has a couple of boxes, and it says PDC approved permits. So I was assuming those were wells that PDC had either applied for and had gotten approval for, but now I just heard you say, oh, maybe those were wastewater wells that you were referring to when you said you weren't going to go forward with those. Is that
correct? The blue outline you see, such as the map 32, that's the space that we acquired from Bayswater. And then the other unit you see there is something that we acquired from Noble that has since expired.
Okay, so those, so the wells that are shown, that says they're permitted well bores. You don't, right, and you don't plan to be drilling those wells.
I think that, let me rephrase that. I think possibly Noble had submitted refiles on there, so those may still be active, but we don't have any plans to use either Bayswater or Noble's permits.
Okay, thanks. And just one more question. I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. You're not saying, and you haven't said this at all, I just want to make sure I'm not implying it from anything that you've said, that there's any kind of sort of bad faith involved here, leading you on in discussions or finding out information from you and then going ahead and filing. There's no intention on your part to imply that, right? You started, as I understand, you were having preliminary discussions with Nickel Road about potentially working something out, and then they went ahead and filed.
Absolutely, that's correct. We did no kind of misguided bad faith. As soon as we kind of the Noble transaction in 2018 is when we really kicked off and started planning this area. I think you can see that by submitting 12 DSUs. We kind of got it together simply to file with title requirements and overall plans. So I think it's just unique timing to find out such, but we've been working with Nickel Road to try to wheel deals for several months now. Again, another matter with them, and one of the reasons why we held off in our DSUs that you see here, we thought maybe we could work out a deal prior to moving to here. And we may be able to still, but everything's been in good faith. We don't believe in.
Okay. Good. That's what I wanted to hear you say. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Valley.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Boygan, but I think he was asking if you were implying they operated in bad faith.
Sorry. No, so we don't believe that operating in bad faith.
Thank you.
I thought you were asking we operated bad faith. No.
Assuming you would be clear that you were not operating in bad faith, but I want to make sure you weren't implying that they were.
Correct. I do not think that Nickel Road is operating in that phase.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Very well. Who's next, Mr. Jewell?
Thank you, Commissioner Benson. I'd like to present our next witness, Mr. John Yetkin. Good afternoon, Mr. Yetkin. Good afternoon. You could please introduce yourself and let us know your position at PDC.
Sure. My name is John Yetkin. I'm the development engineer for Wattenberg asset in PDC. I've been working with PDC for 2 years now. I have 6 years of total experience in Wattenberg reservoir engineering.
Could you briefly tell the commission about your education?
Sure.
And all years experience?
I have 16 years of overall petroleum engineering experience. I graduated from mining engineering, undergraduate degree from Middle East Technical University. I have an industrial management master's degree from Clemson, and I have petroleum engineering master's degree from Colorado School of Mines.
Thank you, Mr. Yetkin. Are you familiar with the lands under consideration today?
Yes, sir.
Did you have a hand in creating these exhibits?
Yes.
We are recycling these just for the engineering perspective. But looking at Exhibit A, Mr. Yetkin, can you please briefly describe Exhibit A from your perspective?
Sure. I will actually thank you for your time this afternoon. I will summarize. I will try to summarize 5 main differences in development approaches between PDC and Nickel Road lands under consideration. I also talk to how these differences could lead to possible reduction in efficiency, and it may increase in waste for Nickel Road development. So based on my reservoir engineering experience in Wattenberg and the technical papers I've read, here are the summaries of these five main differences. So as we can see in Exhibit B here, there's a variety, as been talked about in lateral lengths. As you can see, 1 mile lateral lengths, 1.5 to 2 mile lateral lengths. According to my experience, longer laterals like 2 mile wellbores have achieved higher production along with better economics and higher reserve potential in this area. On the other hand, 1 mile, especially 1 mile short laterals, have been seen to have the potential to become uneconomic in this area given the current commodity prices. And this could also lead to shorter economic well life, lower ultimate recovery, and hence increased waste. So furthermore, this is my second point I want to make about Exhibit 2, is furthermore, I postulate that this variety in lateral lengths based on Nickel Road's development plan is probably due to avoiding historical vertical wells in this area. As PDC, I should state that we do not consider vertical wells neither a mechanical nor an operational risk. And we have a track record with developing our continuous horizontal well development around many vertical wells. So hence, PDC can drill longer lateral lengths in presence of vertical wells in this area and can achieve better overall efficiency.
Mr. Yetkin, real quickly, are you aware of any proposed wellbore spacing unit that would address any of these drainage issues that you see in Exhibit B?
Are you, can you expand the question a little bit? Are you talking about?
Well, this docket number today before us, 903, if you will, is for a drilling and spacing unit. And are you aware of any proposal for a wellbore spacing unit that would be in tandem with this?
We are preparing our DSUs currently. And
you haven't seen a wellbore proposal from the board?
No, sir. Continuing with my number 3 difference, number 3 difference.
Exhibit C.
Yeah, it goes along with Exhibit C. I'd like to talk about some of the economic indicators and production forecast in Nickel Road's testimony. While I'm not questioning the forecast or type curve techniques that Nickel Road used, there are some, there are a few reasons these numbers that we presented could highly be optimistic in my case. So one of the reasons I said is because of this. According to Legal Road's testimony, they propose a maximum of 32 wells to be drilled in the land under consideration. When I looked at the wells, the analog horizontal wells that were presented in Nickel Road's testimony to create their type curve production figures, most of those wells were drilled with a level of well density well under that 32, number 32. Hence, with this many wells closely drilled in this area, I believe, according to my experience, the production would degrade significantly from Nickel Road's forecast due to high interference effects and vertical communication between wells. Also, compared to non-data we analyzed in this area, Nickel Road's proposed capital costs appear to be underestimated. It is questionable that Nickel Road could achieve these cost figures for forecasting without compromising such key operational metrics such as completion distance that was touched upon before. We can move to, I think, Exhibit D.
Lastly, can you identify Exhibit D?
Thank you. In Exhibit D has been talked about. You can see that red hashed area that we think that it's actually, yeah. We can go back to Exhibit C for a second. There's another concern I'd like to talk about, which is the risk of possible phase development for Nickel Road. Now, this may lead to further production degradation, and this phenomenon is known as the parent-child relationship. In this phenomenon, horizontal wells that are drilled in phases show lower production volumes in each successive phase. Another impact of phase development is the risk of what we call frac into. So the wells that are drilled later hitting with their hydraulic fractures the older wells, and maybe making the older wells becoming obsolete or unproductive anymore. So that's another worry of mine I wanted to put out there.
Mr. Yekin, do you have any facts that lead you to believe there would be a phase development should this DSU be approved?
I believe the phase development is what I've seen from other operators, especially small operators in this area. I've seen that practice to be done before, so that's what I'm planning my thoughts upon.
Do you have any personal interactions with Nickel Road that led to that discussion about potential phase development?
I talked to Mr. Haney a little bit about how the operation may or may not go, and then he might have mentioned something close to that. Yeah, thanks. The last point that I want to make is the red hatch exhibit. As you can see, this red hatch area has no well coverage. This is a result of 460 setbacks that Nickel Road has to adhere to. On the other hand, PDC would develop the same area with reduced setbacks as PDC has continuous acreage and continuous lateral reach for the area under consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Yekin. As we summarize here, in your opinion, does Nickel Road's plan, this 903 matter, protect relative rights and prevent waste?
Well, I don't believe so.
In your opinion, does PDC's development plans protect relative rights and prevent waste in the application?
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you, Mr. Yekin. Further questions?
Ms. Wazelenki?
Thank you, Mr. Yet. Can I just have a few follow-up questions for you? The two applications that PDC filed that we've been discussing today, they're not in front of the commission for approval today, but they do show 16 wells per unit. Can you tell me the total well count distribution in the Codell versus the Niobrara for those two units?
In this situation, the Codells haven't been designated yet, but since the area of Codell thickness is fairly good in this area, it could be a wine rack type of design where some of these wells, I can't tell you exactly how many wells Codells are.
Thank you. Thank you. How many Niobrara intervals would you plan to target with these two proposed units?
Again, it's going into the details of the development plan in the specific area, but usually we develop B and C bench most of the time, but it could be different for this area.
Thank you. Have you calculated any recovery factors for these two proposed units and your planned development?
Recovery factors are usually estimates based on general geology and the productivity of the area. We believe that since this is an area between volatile and black oil, recovery factors are usually lower than what we see in some of our areas such as Kersey. We believe that we got something close to upwards of 10% recovery factors. So I believe there we could see less recovery factors in this area.
Thank you. Has PDC drilled any 1 mile horizontal wells in this area?
In the vicinity, we have older wells up north of this area that are 1 mile.
And are those economic, would you consider?
Well, they were drilled a long time ago, first of all. So the commodity prices were different in the case. And in that case, they were probably economic. But since with current commodity prices, there's a reduction in the value of 1 mile wells.
Thank you. Have you drilled 1.5 mile wells in this area?
Yeah, I believe we have some 1.5 mile wells.
And would you consider those economic in this area?
Some of them, not the wells that we specifically drilled, but some of the wells that we examined seem, especially north of this area, are borderline, based on, again, commodity prices.
Thank you. I have no further questions. May I just get a quick time check?
Yes, 10 minutes, 5 seconds.
Thank you.
How about over here?
16 minutes.
Thank you. No redirect.
No redirect, okay. Commissioners, any questions? One, but you go ahead this time. You get the first.
Okay. If I could ask a point of clarification, I thought I heard you say that PDC would has a lot of experience in drilling around and near vertical wells, and therefore wouldn't expect to have problems. But at the same time, you think Nickel Road would have problems, parent-child relationships, interference, and yet we heard them say that they've designed their program to avoid vertical wells. So what's the basis for your thought that you could do it and they can't?
Sure. There are a couple of things that you mentioned in your comments. One of them is parent-child relationship between among horizontal wells. So that's what I touched upon at phase development, where an operator would go and drill its initial number of wells, and then a year later, or a couple of years later, maybe come back and drill another horizontal well parallel to the other ones. So that's the parent-child relationship impact in that case. And what PDC would like to do is usually develop that acreage, whatever we have or whatever you apply for, in one drilling program. That's what would get rid of the parent-child relationship.
I apologize for the misstatement.
No problem.
Yeah, but then also you talked about interference with vertical wells, which you said you could handle and they couldn't.
We have one of the most efficient completion crews in Colorado, we believe, and then we have a really good drilling group that can handle, approach closely to the vertical wells without damaging the wellbores itself. However, there's always the possibility of impact hydraulic fracking the horizontal well towards the vertical well. So that most of the time, depending on the fracture systems in the ground and how the fractures will grow, even though you think that you are further away from vertical wall, sometimes that impact to the vertical well is unavoidable. So it doesn't matter what crews drilling or completing that area; it could happen to any operator. But we have plans in place to handle those situations. Since we've done before, we have drilled around many vertical wells in our plants.
And if I'm not mistaken, the commission has an offset well policy that requires making sure that the integrity of vertical wells is not compromised by the horizontal wells, right? You might have to, as they might have to, take steps to make sure that those vertical wells are not impacted.
That's right, so I believe that we can drill around those well bores, not without cutting our well bores short, horizontal well bores short.
Okay. Thanks.
I'll follow up with a couple of questions there. I think just to ensure that that's an understanding, you're aware that there is a policy that the commission has with respect to interference between vertical wells and horizontal wells.
Yes.
It's my understanding that whatever you would plan would address that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. But yeah, I think you also heard that Nickel Road said that they had a plan in place to address those vertical well bores also. You mentioned that, which by the head nod, I'll assume that's yes. You mentioned that you were concerned about their estimates for their drill and complete costs. And in their exhibit, if I can get this silly thing to wake up, their exhibit 24, notionally, when you looked at that, sort of, what would you estimate for drill and complete costs for 1.5, 1 and 2 mile laterals in Codell and Niobrara?
So the only thing I can say that is those are according to our estimates. So those numbers are what I consider to be close to what we estimate with our really efficient crews that we've been working for a long time in the basin. That's why I'd like, that's a questionable thing that, a new operator in the area may or may not achieve that kind of a cost efficiency.
Very well. Thank you. Any other commissioner questions? Okay.
PDC has no further witnesses. Thank you.
Okay, I think the next thing in which we had a presentation of statements under Rule 510, if any, there is one in the exhibits. I don't know if we really need to read that out loud, Ms. Larson.
My understanding, and Mr. Eden will correct me if I'm wrong, the 510 statement is in your portfolio, so it's a matter of the record on this matter.
Okay, very well. And then the next item is the presentation of staff analysis. Their rebuttal comes after the staff analysis. Sorry, it's on the list. Just following along. Okay. Would you care to do that, please? Consider this a request.
Sure. As you saw in my hearing officer recommendation, that's part of the portfolio. I think on balance here, based on the evidence that I had available to me before this hearing, I recommended that the commission dismiss PDC's protest and grant Nickel Road's application. Nothing I've seen today in the evidence changes my conclusion in that regard.
Any questions of staff from the commissioners?
Mr. Roush,
let him off easy today.
Very well.
Our next item on here is a rebuttal by Nickel Road.
Thank you. I do have a few redirect and rebuttal questions for Mr. Andrew Haney. Mr. Haney, at the outset of the hearing, we spoke a little bit about Nickel Road's interest within the unit, and I'd just like you to expand a little bit on Nickel Road's interest as of now and what it will be in the next month.
Thank you for the question. I do want to expand on that because, again, as a small operator in Colorado, we take time to aggregate our positions and we look for good opportunities. We've been successful doing that now in several other DSUs. And we've just, since we've last been in front of you, increased our Colorado labor force by 25%, brought on the 3 new wells we talked about. So we are growing. That said, we do have interest here, and based on a current opportunity that we have under contract, we're looking to have over 10% leasehold here in April. So on we go, very similar maturation to what we've seen in our other units. In those 2 units, we've gotten up over 50% and one over 70%. So it's part of the process to go ahead and put forth a plan that others can get around, that mineral owners can consent to and move forward with. But we have anticipation that we are going to be able to increase that significantly, and we're doing that right now.
Thank you, Mr. Haney. I'd like you to speak a little bit about the timing of your development. If this unit is approved, when would you develop the unit?
We spoke to it a little bit earlier, but we'd like to break ground before this year. When we say break ground, we'd like to start building the surface location. It will depend on rig availability as to whether we can get the rig before the end of the year, but we will definitely prioritize this project. This is a very significant area and a very economic area, I would argue. And honestly confused as to why it's been idle for development for so long. But we see a big opportunity here. We'd like to, you can see in our timeline, we got involved in this project in the middle of 2018, and we've been on the gas ever since. So we'd like to bring this development forward.
Thank you, Mr. Haney.
Let me actually address one other issue. There's a few other ones I want to unpack as well. Regarding stream and the timing of the phasing discussion, it would be great to come in here and drill all these wells at once from a unit cost standpoint. That's not a reality. The people that are dedicated to DCP midstream, much like PDC is in this area, are on allocated volumes right now. So going in here and drilling 30 some wells or whatever your number of wells is and just bringing them all online is not even achievable. So there has to be some sort of a phased development. And I think the parent-child effect is something that all operators deal with, but it is something that we all deal with in similar fashions. I don't think anybody has the magic answer to that. So we have to be very mindful of the type of phasing that not only suits the reservoir, but also suits the ability to take away and get capacity out of this area. One of the unique opportunities we have Nickel Road here is our acreage is not dedicated. So unlike PDC, we have the ability to get into some new pipe here. We are talking to people we're talking to in all opportunities here, and we may actually find ourselves in a situation where we have better takeaway capacity. So I just want that to be in mind when it's not the phasing decision. It has to encompass the entire equation when we talk about timing.
Thank you, Mr. Haney. We spoke a little bit about the 318A wellbore spacing units. Does Nickel Road intend to notice and file permits for 318A wells?
We do. We're actually in the process of doing that right now. We plan to do that here within the next month.
Thank you. We also heard PDC's engineers speak a little bit to the well count and specifically to Nickel Road's costs being underestimated. I'm wondering if you could address that testimony.
I'd be happy to. The cost thing is, I don't know what else to do other than to point to the latest, presentation by Extraction, who is very active in the basin, but they have two mile laterals is being done for $4.9 million in CapEx. And I understand that we're not PDC in terms of the number of wells that we operate, but the principals of Nickel Road have interest in over 300 wells in this basin. So we know our way around. And on our first 3 well occupation, we were able to put away completions 7 to 9 stages a day, just like all the other offset guys do. So I don't think having one name means that you can be efficient. I think there's plenty of people that have smaller businesses that can do things as efficiently.
Thank you, Mr. Haney. My last question for you. We've heard some allegations that if this unit is approved, the 3 legs of the 3-legged stool may not be met in terms of preventing waste, protecting correlative rights, and avoiding the drilling of unnecessary wells. I'm just wondering if you could address that testimony and state your opinion on that testimony.
Absolutely. I think, first of all, I was talking about correlative rights first, and I think one of the questions was already asked. I guess if I was a mineral interest owner in one of these vertical wells, I'd be worried right now about what's going to happen to my checks and my production. We've gone out into this area being very mindful of trying to manage the situation. We can absolutely go back and extend the lateral if the opportunity exists. It would make perfect sense to do so. But I think when you go and you just lay a blanket program down across a larger area without the specifics of the area, it becomes a very difficult proposition to achieve the protection of correlative rights. So in this situation, we're trying to be mindful of surface challenges, but also the people that are involved here as well, because it will impact those vertical wells if we just lay horizontals right around them, if we just drill around them. There are things that need to be considered here that are specific to this area. In terms of the waste discussion, in terms of unnecessary drilling of wells, again, we have units that have been proposed just to the north of this area that have been approved with 32 wells. I think what's important, let's talk about waste for a minute. What we just heard, we don't even know how many wells per lateral PDC is planning to drill. I honestly couldn't tell you if those 16 sticks represent more than one well on each of those sticks, because we talked about, I heard wine rack, and I heard about there could be stacked laterals there. We didn't get any texture on their plan. But I can tell you that Nickel Road's plan is going to develop the Niobrara A, the B, the C, and the Codell, all 4 productive benches. So while we heard Mr. Yekin talk about the B and the C, maybe some Codells, we are going to complete the entire vertical section because it's been proven to be commercially viable. I guess we're also talking about waste. I don't know how PDC necessarily feels about drilling on wells, but it sounds like maybe they've done that. But we found this area to be quite economic. And understand that where you can get longer lateral, it's ideal. There are plenty of economic 1-mile wells in this basin, and it is certainly not a waste of people's money to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Haney. I have no further questions. Larson, may I get a brief time check?
Yes, 3 minutes and 34 seconds.
Very well, Mr. Jewell.
If I could call back Mr. Wagner, please.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. And similarly, I just want to clear up a few statements, misstatements that were made to make sure the record is clear. But could you again, Mr. Wagner, remind us of your working interest in this proposed DSU?
In Nickel Roads or in ours?
In this 903 matter, sir, Nickel Roads.
So again, we're majority mortgage owner, approximately 56% weighing on new title.
And you actually agree that this is a very economic zone. We have no dispute with Mr. Haney. That's why I want to drill it efficiently with bilaterals.
That's correct.
And how many well bores did your applications, 338, 339, call for?
We had 16 wells apiece.
So your opinion that, we talk about the 3-legged stool, and one of those is drilling unnecessary wells, which actually is a subset of waste itself. Is that not a waste? To drill 32 instead of 16?
We believe that our plan is not wasteful, and there's this.
And there was some conjecture made toward PDC. We already established for the record, no bad faith, but a lot of statements made about your surface use attempts and, quote, a proposed surface location, but that indeed was conjecture.
Right. We kind of put some of our plans on hold in this area because we thought we could come to an agreement with Nickel Road before really pursuing these particular sections.
Which is interesting because Nickel Road reminds us that only this matter, this DSU 903, is under discussion. However, they've mentioned these wellbore proposals forthcoming, but again, you were not aware of these, correct?
Correct.
And so far, that's not technically under consideration for today. I want to go back to sections 29 and 32 and remind the commissioners as well that it's true that 338, 339 will vacate that western spacing unit of 2932. It's not all 2932.
Yes.
And back to our exhibit C, we talked about 32, and it seemed to be implied that PDC would drill 1-milers, but is that your optimal development plan for 32?
No. If the Nickel Road DSU prevails, we've laid out 1-mile laterals, but we're going to really have to do some reevaluating and see what makes sense.
The implication would be you're forced in a way to do something that would be less economic with those lands. Hence is why you said stranded earlier.
Right.
No further questions. Ms. Wagner.
All right, we're on the closing statements, and you have how much time left? Sorry.
Nickel Road has 3 minutes and 34 seconds, and PDC has 13 minutes and 1 second.
Okay, just a moment.
Thank you. Chairman Benton, would you permit one Sir rebuttal question?
It's not on my list, but I will go ahead and do that.
I appreciate it. We'll extend the same favor to
Jewel, we will accommodate you for that as well.
Thank you. Mr. Haney, I'd just like you to address some alternatives that PDC could utilize to develop the offset acreage.
Yeah, and I just want to come back to that point. I think the question was already asked, but I want to reiterate. There is quite a few alternatives that could be brought to bear here, given the sheer number of sections that are involved in this broader plan that PDC speaks of. We spent about an hour in the afternoon and we came up with at least 10 different alternative scenarios to split up those into 2 milers without having to strand acreage or things of that nature. So I just wanted to point out again that there are plenty of alternatives here. And again, if these plans would have been shared in any level of texture before we have gotten to this point, there could have been more understanding of that, but there are plenty of alternatives here. I would just also like to state that, well, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Mr. Jewell?
Mr. Wagner, one quick Sir rebuttal point. The logic here, I think, is twisted a little bit because you may or may not, PDC may or may not have more options available, but this is Nickel Road's only one. Can you elaborate on your opinion of what it implies if they get their way on this and the disruption that causes PDC? So it's like to give them what they want, what are the effects to PDC?
Sure, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. If this is approved, it disrupts our larger potential CDP plan. And so we'd have to go back to the drawing board to see what we could do there. Not sure it'd be accurate to say that we have all these alternatives to develop when we know our own acreage. And we have thrown out several proposals to Nickel Road for alternatives, settlement, and whatnot. So we haven't been able to come to agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner.
Okay, how much time does Nickel Road have left now?
2 minutes and 33 seconds.
Okay, so you have time for your closing statement.
I'll do a brief closing.
Please, don't let the witnesses get away because we're going to have some questions.
That sounds good.
It may not be for you, but you just can't leave the room. So.
Thank you, commissioners. I really do appreciate your time today. Unlike the picture painted by PDC, Nickel Road is an operator growing organically in this basin. Nickel Road has drilled wells since the last time Nickel Road came before you last September in a contested spacing hearing. Nickel Road is currently drilling and acquiring leasehold and mineral interests throughout the DJ Basin. Nickel Road's application meets all 3 legs of the 3-legged stool, and so under your authority under the Act, you can approve this application today. PDC's applications are not before you for consideration or approval today. PDC's development illustration is not methodically thought out to address existing wells, permitted wells, existing spacing, or the most efficient development in this area of the DJ Basin. In fact, PDC's proposed development will harm correlative rights based on the testimony you heard today, considering the currently producing wells within the application lands. So I think our testimony speaks for itself at this time, and for these reasons, I just ask that you approve Nickel Road spacing unit today. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Jewell.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. My friends, here it is. Here it is. Without rehashing any facts from January, but if you will, continuing a bit of a conversation from 2 of those matters where there may not have been as well developed of a plan, that we actually put skin in the game to have competing DSUs, to put our company's secrets and our plans on the line to say where we're going with this, to be as extraordinarily careful as PDC has been. Almost like they would be penalized for being prudent. You heard testimony that indicated that they had 22 DSUs. The 2 were withheld. Good faith. Hoping to get a deal stricken here that would satisfy both sides. They work well together. and we're disappointed we couldn't get anything done before now. But that is that missing piece. If this piece is taken away, it does grow into weird balance for PDC to figure out how we want to do a CDP effectively for these lands. Admittedly, Mr. Wagner indicated that maybe not 86, but if the whole idea of the CDP is to minimize disruption and maximize the efficient development of lands in a way that can make this state proud, that's the way to do it. As Mr. Wagner testified beginning in 2017, if you will, when their deals with Bayswater and Noble began, that's the laying of the groundwork to do it right, to do it correctly. It does take time. Just showering permits and showering applications in the greater water, yes, it's exciting. These are economic plans. We agree with Mr. Haney. But we also have the discipline to know how to go about it correctly. We think that is so important now, especially here in 2019 with everything we are dealing with as far as prudent operations. So please do not allow PDC to be criticized for being careful. Let's look at the merits, the broader picture, the way that this can be successful. And look how PDC has taken a very serious approach to these and broader lands and support that effort. Make this an example for other operators to consolidate, to clean up, do things right, do things prudently. It's right here, this missing piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Boygan.
I'm not even sure this is worth it at this point, but I'll throw this out there for whatever witness wants to answer. If this application is approved and these permits of Nickel Road are approved, I'm assuming that Nickel Road's going to be hitting PDC with a bunch of AFEs in the near future. So I'll ask, have you discussed whether or not PDC would participate in those wells? And is Nickel Road prepared to drill those wells via pooling if necessary, if PDC doesn't want to consent? So I'm not sure who's the right witness for each of you to answer, but I'd like to know how this thing is actually going to go forward.
I'll just answer on behalf of Nickel Road. We have had several discussions with PDC on this. We've kicked back and forth several offers. Unfortunately, none of them that were very acceptable to our position. For those reasons, I think at this point in time, I have high confidence in that we will move forward to pool and develop these lands. I would always say that we're always open to thoughts that we'd like to be good partners. We've been good partners around here, but if we're left with no other option, we will absolutely put our dollars in the ground.
I don't know if PDC wants to answer or not.
I think I just answered my capacity questions fully regarding to higher paycheck. But I will say that, to my knowledge, we'd likely find an alternative, either possibly farming this out or not participating at all. But again, subject to mention approval. I'm not sure that the PDC would go forward in its capacity, but maybe someone else.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks. That's all.
Very well. Any other commissioners with questions? Okay. I guess at this point we will close the record. May I propose that we take a brief break and come back and deliberate? If that works. Okay. You all be back. Oh, let's try for about 10 minutes.
Yes.
We're gonna.
He's gonna be in there still, actually.
Is he?
You should reach out to him.
Okay.
Have you seen the pictures of the number 3?
I'm so excited about this. Okay.
I'm just kidding.
It is. Probably oh, really? Yeah.
So it's from Susan Nottingham currently. Grew up on a slope. Married a car up there also. Yeah. Try to do this, it's not and you know, the rest stop right there at the junction. There's a little church there. It used to be a schoolhouse. That's where I went to grade school.
Decided to load it.
Gives you a different insight. That was canceled for the last couple of years. I don't know why. Hold on. People still do it. Okay, I got it. I'm in front.
Old school.
Until they're not gonna. How bad?
So, probably 20 minutes, I'd say. Okay. We should be ready for you.
You just want to set it up?
Oh, sorry.
We got a break, make sure it works.
finishes spacing.
Do we still have Commissioner Holton? Commissioner Holton still available? I still haven't connected. I think we're ready.
Good job as always, my friend.
Me too. Always good to be up here with you.
Yes, ma'am.
Even though we're on different sides.
Y'all are easy to respect. So.
Okay. All right, excellent. All right. You're all ready? We'll get started. Officially, I don't think we've closed the record, so we will close the record.
Okay.
And continue on to deliberations. Commissioners, any comments? Would you like to? I'm looking for either Commissioner Jolly or Commissioner Boygan to say something here.
Well, I believe we have two really good operators here. And, you know, in a perfect world, I'd like to see more planning that I think PDC has put into this. However, we're just, it's not part of our rules or our past procedures to have a minimum amount of percentage ownership in an application. I think Nickel Road's plan, they're well thought out. I like how they have anticipated about the surface issues. And infill in this vertical field out here. I think they planned it out well. And also struck by landowner mineral owners 510 statement held by at least since 1983. Sees an opportunity to get some development going. And despite his negative comment about Pete, I think positive comments about the road are very persuasive to me. I don't see a reason to overturn Officer Eden's recommendation, and that's the way I'm leaning right now.
Well, thank you. Mr. Boygan?
Thank you. I think Commissioner Jolly stated it very well. We have Mr. Newell here in another valiant effort to forestall and I don't mean that really in a negative or sarcastic way. I mean it actually in a very positive way. It's an admirable effort on behalf of a larger operator, established operator in the basin. Who's got a large acreage position and wants to develop that acreage at its pace. And you've got a small operator that's going to get itself established and is playing the niches and the bits and the pieces that the big guys haven't locked up. But the big guys are in fact locking it up because they're not drilling it. They can't drill everything, obviously. And so what you got here is another situation like we had last time of small guy who's got small interest and wants to get it drilled and is ready to go. It's got its permits filed. It's got its surface location. And you got a big guy who wants to soon wait and put this in the system and prioritize its capital allocation and drill it as it can get to it. And I don't doubt anything PDC said about its long-term plans for the area. The problem that we have is that we don't really have, I think, the license under the way the act is written and the rules to think about that. I mean,
Unless
we were concerned that the road really couldn't perform, really didn't have its location and its wells ready to go, I don't really think we have a whole lot of choice. And to me, it keeps coming back to, we've got to come up with a better way of dealing with this. Because if we approve this application, there's no assurance that Nickel Road will perform. There's no required commitment. They don't put a deadline on it. PDC was telling us they've got these older DSUs that they inherited that they don't intend to use. They didn't get drilled. And I understand it's changed, which is fine, but it doesn't mean that DSUs that get approved ought to just be hanging around forever. And we now have a situation where Nickel Road configured its proposed drilling plan, at least in part, I assume, because of the existing DSU that's still out there, hasn't been abandoned, although from the exhibits, appears that that border section that's inside that old DSU is owned by PDC and so wouldn't be available to be leased. So it might not benefit Nickel Road anyway, although they're going to pull the whole thing. So I'm just saying that the system is highly imperfect, and we're using DSUs as some kind of a proxy for establishing development priority out there with no real guidelines or commitments. It does come down to, most of the time, a first-in-time type of system. And I just don't think that's the best way to run a railroad. But at this point, I don't see where we have any other choice. So I'm inclined the way Commissioner Jolly is to uphold the hearing officer's recommendation.
Very well, thank you. Commissioner Hunsaker Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the representatives from Nickel Road and PDC for coming today. And I think it'd be great if we could find a way to work together. In listening to today's testimony, I agree with the hearing officer's analysis and believe as represented, Nickel Road meets the standard for a spacing application. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Hager.
I don't know if they repeat what Commissioner Martin said. One thing I'd like to add is I do want operators to look at the CDPs. I think we had that. But I believe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, develop that plan before it came to us, we were able to reserve that acreage, right? They came to the commission that we're gonna work on the EDP and no drilling units can be applied for in this area for a certain amount of time, so that we have time to stay together.
Wait, I need to check, but I believe you are correct on that,
Yeah.
that we did, and Mr. Davenport or Ms. Larson.
You're correct that in the Noble CDP that was proposed and approved by the commission that process did occur. Yes.
Right. And so I would encourage operators like PDC who have these development plans. It sounds like you guys were talking about it and haven't quite followed through, but I would highly encourage you to do it. I think the commission looks favorably on those development plans. And I think there is a way to save some of that acreage for you if you're thinking about it or kind of moving in that direction. In this instance, it's not there yet, at least formally. And I think that ties our hands a little bit. I also have no reason to think that Nickel Road's plan doesn't meet the three-legged stool. It's thought out. They've got answers to every question that's been asked. And I don't have any reason to believe that they can't do this. And then lastly is the 510 statements are always very important to me. And Nickel Road having support of a surface owner plus a mineral owner speaks or weighs heavily on my decision too.
Thank you. Commissioner Overturf?
I don't have anything else to add to what's been said already. Thank you.
All right. Briefly, and I would echo all of that. I think the one thing that concerns me a bit is there seemed to be quite a lot of discussion around potentially disrupting PDC's CDP plan. But if you look at their exhibit, there's a substantial amount of acreage held here. And I think that being able to develop alternatives to that CDP and potentially include this somehow is certainly feasible and certainly possible. So that's the only thing I'll add to that. I think I agree with Commissioner Egger. The 510 statement carries a lot of weight with me as well. So I do support the hearing officer's recommendation. If there's no other comments or questions, we could proceed to a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Commissioner Holton, you're there.
I'm alive.
We can barely hear you. Hold on a moment. There we go.
Got it?
Wait.
Hello.
Wait for it. All right, let's try again.
You there?
Yes.
The only thing that I would say is that, Mr. Chairman, you and I have been on this commission since 2011, and we've been hearing these type of cases for the last 8 years, and it's just amazing to me that we haven't come up with someplace in the middle that we're not a party that is going to negotiate with the two operators. They need to sit at the table. So I would encourage the commissioners, I agree with what they said, but I would encourage them to come up with something that we can all discuss, we can all get on back with, so that this first in time stuff doesn't happen, the percentage of the operating ownership doesn't happen. We need to figure something out. There's no reason why we should have to sit here for 2.5 hours for a case that might as well have been adjudicated in district court.
Thank you. Is that it?
That's it.
And thanks for the reminder. And I was just thinking about that. There was, questions about Nickel Road's ability to execute. And I think from the experience of being on this commission, there has been a few times where we've seen some of these come forward where it clearly was seen as potential land grab. But here Nickel Road has had a track record of executing on a program. They clearly have a plan in place, permits filed. So I think I'm comfortable that they're going to move forward with this program.
No, I agree with the hearing officer's deal. I think part of it too was just to tell the rest of the commissioners how old you are.
Thanks. All right. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'd make a motion that we approve the hearing officer's recommendation and that we approve the application. That's my train of thought, sorry. By Nickel Road here and deny the protest of PDC. Sorry.
So it's your motion is to approve. Just a second, Commissioner Holden, to approve the application to establish 1,120 acre drilling and spacing unit and approve 32 horizontal wells for production of oil and gas by Nickel Road. Is that correct?
That's what I meant.
Okay, and that would be seconded by Commissioner Holton?
Yes.
Very well. Yes.
Approving the wells as such.
Right. Right. It's just the application for the DSU. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you all for your time today.
Commissioners, thank you for this analysis. Very helpful.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Yes.
The heat maybe just happened.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think he wants to, sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay, sounds good. Just figuring out everything is.
Yeah.
All right, Ms. Larson. What is our next matter?
So, Mr. Chair, you have before you an application from the City and County of Broomfield. This is docket number 180400299. The hearing officer on this matter is James Rouse, and Mr. Rouse will introduce that matter for you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by the City and County of Broomfield for a establishment of a designated outside activity area. There are no protests to this application. However, these requests are, I would say, very rare. I don't know that we have ever approved one. I know we have not approved one on the consent agenda, and we may have approved one ever, I'm told. So we are bringing it before you today for you to hear the evidence and grant your approval of it.
Okay. I think we did, I do recall one, and Commissioner Holton will probably make some other reference to my age again. We did have one other application for DOHA some time ago, and I think that one we denied. It was quite a rather strange one, and that took place several years back. So we welcome this one. I do think Mr. Barber, Mr. Davenport asked for one point of clarification in your presentation as to what setback you are asking for in this application. So you make sure that you cover that in your presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Is there any set time here do they have?
My understanding is they thought they could do it in 20 minutes, but we'll see.
All right.
Okay.
That'll be excellent.
Good afternoon, Phil Barber, here on behalf of the City and County of Broomfield, seeking a designated outside activity area in Broomfield for space that's referred to as the Broomfield Community Commons. The rule defines the designated outside activity area essentially in two ways. This is the definitional section, and both are defined as an outdoor venue or recreation area, such as a playground, permanent sports field, amphitheater, or other similar place of public assembly. And that's both subsection 1 and 2 of the definition. Subsection 1 specifies that it can be a designated outside activity area that is owned or operated by a local government. This one is. And subsection 2 doesn't have that ownership requirement, but it does have a requirement that the commission make a finding that ingress or egress from the area could be impeded by oil and gas operations in the area or within the buffer. So in response to Commissioner Benton's question, let me just say up front that the City and County of Broomfield is seeking a DOHA designation for the Broomfield Community Commons and a 350-foot buffer around commons, which is the minimum buffer that the rule allows. We could have asked for more, but that's what the City and County is asking for. By the way, there have been approximately 650 homes personally served with notice of this hearing, and there have been no objections. There have been publication notice twice, and there have been no objections. So we're ready to proceed if the commission is ready to hear us.
Absolutely. Please,
Okay.
please proceed.
First witness is Randy Aronson. Mr. Aarons, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name's Randy Aronson. I'm mayor of the City and County of Broomfield, and I've lived in Broomfield since 1966 and currently serving my third term, 6 years as mayor. But I want to talk to you about how this particular place is a community gym. It's the Broomfield County Commons, and it serves a lot of things. We have a cemetery there. We have a Paul Durda Rec Center there that serves about 1,500 people a day. We have a dog park there. We have a lot of dog park enthusiasts that go use that park. We have soccer fields. One of the things we did years ago, we had some fields, and we promised people we would have fields for kids, and we did that. So we have about 16 soccer fields. You go there on any Saturday and Sunday from 7 a.m. till about 6, and you'll see parking issues because people can't find enough places to park to come watch their kids for soccer. But you literally have thousands of kids that enjoy the soccer. We've also got a lot of other activities we have there. We have cancer walks there. We have our Memorial Day ceremony, which is seen by thousands. We have 17,000 people that come and have picnics and watch fireworks and watch live music on July 4th. So this area is used by thousands of people. Just an interesting note, we have some trails that run through here as well. Kind of an oddity that we noticed last year when we were doing the budget, but Broomfield has 283 miles of streets that we maintain. We have 287 miles of trails that we maintain. So trails is very important to our community. We even tax ourselves to make sure that we have trails and parks. So this is really vital for our community. It's a crown jewel for us. And I would say of the 75,000 residents in Broomfield, they probably frequent this space either by walking their kids in strollers, riding bikes on our trails, attending a soccer game, seeing the fireworks, various other things, probably multiple times a year. So this is a very visible place in the center of our community. Very important to us. Thank you.
Mayor Aaron, let me just ask a couple of questions if I could. Referring to poster board there, and by the way, Commissioners, this is also page 9 of the pamphlet I just passed out, and there's a large version of the Broomfield Community Commons map that we gave you as well. I ask, where is this park in relation to the city and county of Broomfield? Where does it sit?
Well, Broomfield's 33.4 square miles, but if you were to look at all the various corners of Broomfield, this is probably close to the center.
And describe what surrounds this park.
Well, what surrounds the park is down to the, well, it's actually south here, but north is actually the Red Leaf community, and that has some affordable housing up on one side, but primarily residential. On the other side, the east side, we have the Trails community, which is residential. Just to the south, you have the Brandywine Little Park subdivision, and then to the west is the Northmore subdivision where I live. So this place is an easy distance for people to be able to walk or ride their bike. So it's just in the middle of a lot of residential.
Mayor Aarons, how was this park financed and paid?
Well, it's partially paid by our tax that the citizens imposed on themselves in 1998. We got a .025 sales tax. And then we also use some COP certificates of participation to buy this as well. So this is all funded through the city budget.
Is there maintenance and upkeep costs associated with this park?
Absolutely.
How much is that?
Oh, well, seeing how we have the Paul Durda Rec Center, we've got the cemetery, and all the ball fields, I would think we probably spend $4 or $5 million a year in upkeep, between the upkeep on maintenance and personnel.
How much did Broomfield pay to acquire this property? If you know.
Yeah, that was a while ago. We bought that in 98, 2002, 2004. We bought it, several parcels from the Moormeyers.
See Ms. Geological waving her hand.
Do you know the answer?
Yes, I do.
We'll have her address that. You mentioned this in the recreation center. It's the recreation center.
Yeah, that's the Paul Durda Rec. recreation center.
And what happens, what kind of uses are at the recreation?
Well, we've got swimming laps, we've got basketball courts, we've got a climbing wall, we've got classes that we teach, so people go do Pilates or yoga. Just a very thing. We have 1,500, 2,000 people a day that utilize that recreation center.
Mayor, do you have anything else you want to advise the commissioners about with respect to this area?
Well, the only other thing I would say is we actually got a little fishing lake there too that I forgot about. And we have a Broomfield Open Space Foundation, which I'm a part of. We have a fishing derby every year. We've got 1,000 kids come and fish over there. So we do have some wildlife that we're concerned about. I've had one person said they saw 9 coyotes at one time, and we had an ornithologist one time we were having our fishing derby said they spotted 33 different types of birds. I saw 8, but they saw 33.
Anything else?
No, I would actually like to thank the commission. You guys were so kind to come to Broomfield last year and listen to us on a hearing. So it's nice to be able to see you and speak to you again.
All right, any questions for Mayor? I assume there must be an upper age limit for that fishing lake.
No, because it's stocked by the Department of Wildlife. So other than a fishing derby, you can only be 12. But the day after, you're more welcome to come fish.
Thank you. Commissioner Ager.
I don't know if this is appropriate now or you guys are going to cover it later, but we just made the statement that we don't get requests for these designations very often, and I'm wondering why and how this started. Is it something your local government decided or is it your citizens?
I would say it's a combination of both. I think it just kind of came up when you look at a map of Broomfield and you see this acreage in the middle of the community that so many people utilize. But, you know, what did make sense just to make sure that we can preclude any industrial environment from being able to encroach on this area. So we thought it made sense.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
I do have one more question. Maybe if there's other commissioners having. The mineral rights under here, are those leased, unleased, and owned by?
They're severed from the surface.
Okay.
Broomfield owns the surface. Mineral owners, there are a number of them. They've all received actual notice. I believe extraction has a lease. We've got a list of all the owners as part of our pivot here. Let's see. Mineral lessees include elevation midstream, extraction, oil and gas, access, exploration, and 8 North LLC. They were served and they've been up here.
Those are all extraction entities, I believe.
Yeah, they are. All right. Thank you. That's excellent.
And for the record, that's at page 57 of the exhibit that we have passed out. All of the names before that are names of basically lot owners. Any other questions?
No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to just offer this exhibit that we've been looking at that I've handed to you into evidence, and this is the only exhibit we'll have. So this could be exhibit 1 or however you would like to label it.
Thank you.
Exhibit 1, we'll call it?
Yes.
Our next witness is Tammy Yellowcoe. Ms. Yellowcoe is seated next to the board to my left. Yellowcoe, please introduce yourself to the commission if you would, please.
Yes, my name is Tammy Yellowcoe. I work in the city manager's office in Broomfield. I am the local government designee for Broomfield, and I do supervise a 4-member oil and gas division within Broomfield that includes three oil and gas inspectors.
Ms. Yellowcoe, you signed an affidavit that we submitted actually as part of our 511 testimony. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's found at pages 1 through 4 of Exhibit 1.
Yes.
Just so the commission knows why we tried to put this on the consent agenda, but the rule requires notice and hearing. Determined by the Attorney General, but we couldn't have this on there. Ms. Jellicoe, can you add a little bit more detail to what goes on at the Broomfield community?
I can. So, as the mayor said, this is in the heart of Broomfield, surrounded by high-density residential neighborhoods. The total acreage here is 368 acres. There are 237 of that are purchased with open space funding, the 40% sales tax that he mentioned, and also includes a designated trail system. This trail system goes throughout many areas of the Broomfield County Commons and connects into trails on all sides and then into regional trails. There are 80 acres of this that is parks, fields, and the Alberta Recreation Center. I would add a little bit more about the two water bodies on this property. The first one here is called Tom Frost Reservoir. It does have fish in it, and it is fished pretty much year-round. There is a shelter here that's been built where folks can have picnics. There's also public art surrounding this part of the fishing lake. We built a new trailhead here just last year, and it includes off-street parking to all of the trails in the Broomfield County Commons. The second water feature is right over here. It's called the Galt Reservoir. Both of these are in floodplains. They are both considered wetlands, and there's a variety of wildlife throughout the whole Broomfield County Commons, but a large gathering always occurs here of a variety of animal species. For that reason, we built a viewing deck along here so people using the trails can come and go to a wildlife viewing deck at the Galt Reservoir. It's an important focus of the Broomfield County Commons is really the environmental aspects. This too, all through here, is drainage and environmental wetlands right through there along this trail system. There are varieties of trails that go through here. This is about a 1.75 mile trail. There is another trail that is about a 2.5 mile trail. And then there's another trail to the far north. There's about 5 miles of trail system throughout this area. Down here in the lower corner is our Broomfield Cemetery. It does have a whole veterans section, and it has been approved by City Council to be expanded in the near future. The sports fields, as Mayor Aaron represented, there are numerous ones. They're used extensively for soccer tournaments almost steadily throughout the summer months. They're also used for football and other sports. Many of them have artificial turf, very desired by our young athletes in Broomfield. They serve children from the ages of 7 to 18. There's also a pavilion, restrooms, picnic shelters throughout this area, and a concession stand. This is a road that crosses the entire Broomfield County Commons with off-street parking. There's another sports field here. We have a playground and then a art walk through the north up here, and then finally a dog park to the very north up there. There's also sculptures throughout this Broomfield County Commons here and on the trail through here. The Broomfield Recreation Center includes climbing walls, indoor track, all manner of uses. It has a lap pool, lazy river, water rides, and an extensive outdoor deck all along this south side. So the yellow line on your map does show what we're asking to be the designated outside activity area. The orange line does show a 350-foot buffer around that designated outside activity area. The navy blue marks those lots that are within the 350-foot border. They may have common ownership or one owner and extend outside that buffer too. That's what the navy blue is. So again, this 368 acres was acquired by Broomfield over a period of time up until about 2004, both with open space trails, 25% sales tax money and also with public financing. The total cost of all of this area is $48,121,563. That $48 million does not include annual maintenance, and we do have some plans for the future, so that number does grow. We estimate trail usage in this area for 2017, it was 451,505.
That was just the trails?
That's just the trails, right. So that's the 237 acres of trails and also around the lakes and again, the wildlife viewing area. We had an additional 732,885 visitors in 2017 for the remainder of the facilities. This is children, their parents, those viewing the games throughout the year, and those coming to the rec center, the cemetery, etc. That's a total of 2017 usage of over 1.1 million citizens and even others definitely from the region given our tournament schedule each year. That was a 2017 figure, and we do believe that has grown in 2018 and 2019 substantially as we add trailheads and other amenities to this area.
Let me just pause you there for a minute. Is the use of this area limited to citizens of county?
Definitely not. No, it's used very much regionally for the sports activities. There are regional tournaments that happen there all the time.
Thank you. You have anything else you'd like to add?
Not right now.
Let me ask you a few questions.
Sure.
If I could. Is there any disabled area, disability access area?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I was on a team that measured all of our trails, and this whole area, the trail area, is handicap accessible. It does meet the requirements for the Americans with Disabilities Act and all of the fields and other facilities like this.
Are there families that use the trails? You know, you see people in strollers pushing.
Right. There is walking use with strollers. There are a lot of bicycling, and also with children, and a lot of runners use this trail.
Is this an area where parents feel comfortable allowing their children to roam a little bit without them being right on top of them? If you could address that.
Yeah, there definitely is. This is all kind of green grass here to the south of these fields. There's a playground right in the middle of all the fields. The kids are particularly enamored with the wildlife viewing area. You can see right down into some wetlands and quite a lot of activity there. So yeah, and then we have our annual fishing derby here. So yeah, lots of children use this.
Would you describe would you have concerns if there was oil and gas activity?
Well, absolutely. I mean, this designation only precludes surface activity in this area, and it seems with the high volume, over 1.1 million visitors per year, including children, adults, families, visitors, that it's not an appropriate area for an oil and gas facility. We pretty much leave this open for roaming, and there's a lot of activity that takes place. And also, I don't believe emergency response would be at that level particularly set up correctly for oil and gas development. So it just doesn't seem, because it's the heart of Broomfield, because it's used on a daily basis, like my place.
Did you help find the owners of this area? Or did you work with anybody to find the owners of the area and have them served with others?
Yes, we did. Our GIS department first did a location of all mineral owners within the 350-foot buffer, and then we contracted with Baseline Minerals, who did certified milling to all the owners, both surface and mineral.
You turn to the exhibit page 39. Is that where commissioners would find a list of the surface and mineral owners?
Yes, that's correct.
To your knowledge, have there been any objections from surface, mineral, or leasehold?
No, we've had no objections directly to Broomfield, or I believe on the record for this hearing. And also, we've had a lot of citizen response that's positive and is hoping that we prevail.
And Exhibit 5, that's, page 3 of this document, says Baseline Minerals Inc. Prepared the abstract that is used to notify everybody who owns an acre.
Yes, that's correct.
And then if you just for a second look at Exhibit 6, which is page 59,
Yes.
is that an accurate rendition of the acquisition costs for this area?
Yes, those are the acquisition costs. Again, our total costs were 48 million. The acquisition costs are 25 million 800.
Can you estimate how much money is spent by Broomfield every year to maintain this park?
Yeah, I would have to agree with the mayor. We have a lot of staff that work these areas. So I think salaries and benefits are a big part of that, but also just pure maintenance costs for this much acreage and the varied type of uses. So probably 4 million.
Do you have anything else you want to advise the commission about?
I don't.
Thank you. Questions for this witness?
Questions for me? Yes, Commissioner Hunsaker Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. I had a question about the 350-foot setback. And I'm looking at the blue areas, and I know on your map it says residential lots within 350 feet of DOHA. Are all of those lots developed or some of them undeveloped?
I believe where you do not see them developed, there may be HOA ownership or City of Broomfield ownership.
Okay, so the 350-foot setback is appropriate because it bumps up against the neighborhoods in all cases.
Right, that's right. This is owned by this neighborhood, right? But all through here, there, almost on every other side, you have residential lots all through. Where it is brown, those are right away in public streets.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Boygan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to pick up on previous question. So I assume you stayed with 350 feet because that's the minimum you get under the rule. You could go farther, but if you did, you'd have to notify a much larger group of potential owners. Ms. Jellicoe's nodding her head, so I think she agrees, and that was sort of a rhetorical question, but you can, I guess, answer that. Wouldn't that be the challenge? And it's kind of a partial response to what Commissioner Agar mentioned in putting together something like this. You've got to notify everybody whose rights are impacted, including
That's right.
all the owners within the setback area.
For a local government, we spent over 57,000, I think, noticing the folks that we did notice,
Right.
finding them and sending certified mailings. So I think there would be quite a lot of additional costs. Also, I think as we looked at this, we're really interested in protecting the Broomfield County Common. That's at the heart of what we're doing. So we're not trying to expand that.
Well, when I look at this map, some of the blue area, I'm not sure what it is. The blue area that's outside the setback line is what, undeveloped area, or open space, or what?
It's not open space. The parcel starts within the 350-foot buffer and then extends outside the buffer. So we captured all the parts that were within the buffer. So like this big square up top, 350 feet of it to the south are within the buffer. The remainder of it is not.
Yeah, I understood that. I think what I was trying to get at is why wouldn't you include sort of the rest of that square in your proposed setback? Because if that's open space or if that's an open area, it's conceivably, I don't know what the dimensions are, but
I don't believe
could that be the site of a facility, of an oil and gas location?
Right. Again, our goal was protecting the Broomfield County Commons, and so we didn't want to go beyond what we thought was in actual use in accordance with your rules.
If I could address that, Commissioner Boygan, the rule talks about a minimum of 350 feet. The commission has authority and discretion to extend that on behalf of the city, we just felt we'd go with the minimum because that was the least expensive and so the most efficient way of designating the buffer, just to be frank about it.
Sure, if I could respond.
Yes, you may.
I understood that. I figured that we couldn't just do that on our own without noticing the owners within that expanded area, right? I mean, if we just wanted to say today, we decide that we're going to protect this box up here, could we do that? Or do we have to notice anybody?
Well,
They have been noticed. That's owned by the Miller family, and we have first right of refusal for that property, but we have not yet purchased it for the.
Okay. So
Let's follow up on that question. So if we look at the dark blue, that's the buffer or setback area, is that correct?
Yes, within the orange line.
Within the orange line, or within the, if part of that, say in the southeast corner of that triangle, part of that area is within the buffer, and part of it is outside the buffer. Do you know if the ownership changes there, or is that the same owner?
It's the same owner.
So
Whenever the ownership changed, outside of the line, we didn't provide them notice. So.
And the same would be true for that
Yes.
northwest corner.
We noticed the Millers and all the mineral interest owners, and their land extends outside of the 350-foot buffer.
Okay, well, look, I'm not going to second guess your decision. I guess I'm just suggesting that you could design setbacks for a DOAA. It wouldn't have to be a uniform 350 feet. You could sort of draw it around the specific areas, larger areas that you want to protect. And I'm assuming you could even do it now. You could come back in 6 months and say, hey, we want to expand the setbacks and we've noticed these additional people. And okay, well, from my point of
certainly, Mr.
Part
Barber.
of the challenge here was finding out who owned it.
Right.
And we filed the application, frankly, before we did the title work. That's one of the problems that educating about the process.
Yeah, I inferred that from the filing and saw the extensive process that you went through and why there was a big delay between filing it and then ultimately coming here for the hearing. It's not so easy to create one of these. Maybe at a future day we can think about how to make it easier, but from my point of view, this is great. This is exactly why this rule was put into effect, to protect exactly this kind of a place. So I commend you for doing this. And I'm sure, well, from my perspective, whatever we can do to be supportive, we would want to do.
Thank you.
Let me point out, Commissioner Boyd and the hearing officer, Rouse, Ms. Larson, and Mr. Davenport were all very assisting in this process because the rule, in my view, is not totally clear about how much buffer you should have, who you need to serve, surface mineral owners, leasehold owners. We ultimately, with Mr. Davenport's counsel, were advised you have to serve them all, so we did that. Hearing officer Rouse and Davenport and Ms. Larson very easy to work with on this because we've kind of stumbled through it. And
Appreciate hearing that. And Mr. Barber, I might add, with what, 5 miles of trails here, so you could run those in what, 30 minutes or so?
probably not quite. You might be able to.
I don't think so. Yeah.
That's a compliment, I'll accept.
There you go. All right. Any other questions, comments from commissioners? Mr. Rouse, anything that you'd like to add?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Very well. I think we can say thank you very much. Now I'll know what that is when I ride by that every time I do the MS 150 when we go up Sheridan Boulevard. I'll know exactly what that is. I guess at this point, we'll entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Okay, a motion's been made by Commissioner Boygan to approve Broomfield DOHA. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Overturf.
I'm sorry, I apologize for interrupting. This is AG Kyle Davenport. I just want to make it clear, obviously one of the most important things here is the boundary of the DOA as well as the setback. Could we potentially amend that motion to indicate, and help from counsel for Broomfield would be appreciated, exactly where in the record the boundaries of the DOA are, so we can be clear what we're talking about?
Yes, we can. We anticipated that. We prepared a draft order submitted with the 511. In that page 61 in the packet. And the DOA itself is found at page 67 through 70. And then the boundary would be 350 feet outside that legal description.
Thank you, Mr. Barber. I appreciate that.
So it is a meets and bounds description of the DOA. The buffer would be 300 feet away.
Thank you.
Specifically, where is that? Sorry.
The entire description is 67 through 70.
And where's the buffer described?
So the buffer would just be 350 outside.
Okay.
This description.
Does it state that? Sorry.
It would, I think we'd state.
Right. Okay. So make sure we put it in. Would you like to revise your motion to include that
Yes.
We approve the DOA as described, including it's in pages 67 through 70 in Exhibit 1, and include a 350 foot buffer.
Yes, I'm amenable to that. What I would add is this would be subject to staff's opportunity to review this proposed order, the legal description, and to confirm that in staff's view, this legal description is the appropriate legal description, then the 350 foot buffer would then follow from that legal description. They should have the opportunity to confirm it. But that's, I think, the intent. The intent of the motion is that the DOAA, as described in your filings, with a 350 foot setback, is what we are approving. If your legal description accurately describes that, then then the motion calls for that.
Commissioner Boygan, this is Secretary Larson. I can tell you that Mr. Duranlo, the manager of the environmental unit, has reviewed the application, is aware of it and supportive of it. I will confirm with him, though, that there is no issue with respect to the legal description.
Okay, and then just the wording of the proposed order, staff needs to be comfortable with.
Most certainly.
Okay, well, if you can capture all that in the motion, do you want me to say it?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay, I move that the application for designation of a designated outside activity area by the city and county of Broomfield be approved, and that the proposed order submitted with the application be reviewed by staff, and if acceptable in staff's judgment, be adopted by the commission to reflect our approval of the application.
Second again.
Seconded. So motion made by Commissioner Boygan and seconded by Commissioner Overturf with the slight amendments to ensure that we have everything as described. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries, is approved. Again, I would thank you. This is a classic definition of what we had hoped to see brought in front of this commission to create these, and thank you for doing that.
So thank you. I have to tell you, one of those lakes. I used to go rafting. So I really appreciate it for all the kids and the future. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. We need a motion to adjourn until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Hunsaker Ryan, seconded by Commissioner Ager. All in favor? Aye. We will see you all tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Fun games.